The following episode of the Movie Club podcast can and will contain spoilers. Please be aware of this before you listen. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome to the Movie Club podcast, an irregular podcast where we gather a group of film fans and bloggers and we get together and we talk about a bunch of movies and sort of analyze them and just talk about whether or not we like them. This is episode number 21 and it's actually a triple bill this time around. We've got Orson Welles' F for Fake. We're also going to be talking about Banksy's Exit Through the Gift Shop, as well as Catfish. So definitely a very strong collective theme this time around, I'd say. So let's go around and introduce everybody, starting with me. I am Sean from Film Junk.
I'm Kurt from Row3 and TwitchFilm.net.
I am Jay from the documentaryblog.com and the Film Junk podcast.
I'm James from the High and Lowbrow podcast at wherelongtailends.com.
And I'm Marina from row3.com and quietearth.us.
So, I guess for starting this one off, does anyone remember who suggested F for Fake? I kind of think it might have been Matt, but he's not here.
Well, I'll drive that tanker, I guess. Yeah, I'll introduce it. It's Actually, I only saw it for the first time about a year ago, but it is sort of a famous, in its own way, film. I think it was Orson Welles' very last film that he completed. He had lots of films that he didn't complete, and
I think the last thing he did was the voice for Transformers the movie.
Fair
right?
enough, as a director, not as a toy commercial. But I think that the movie sort of was hard to find for a long period of time, but around somewhere in the mid 2004, 2005, it became widely available either through the Criterion print or in some other form. And when you go back and look at it now, you really see it's kind of a pioneering editing film. But the film itself is about the art world and a guy who makes fake paintings. He doesn't copy other people's paintings. He copies other people's styles and passes them off as originals. And he has been selling these paintings all of his life. And a guy writes a book at him. And the guy who wrote the book actually ends up being the same guy who didn't write the fake biography on Howard Hughes. So you have a guy who paints fakes having a book written about him by another guy who makes fakes. And then, of course, Orson Welles is famous for The War of the Worlds, which is one of the great radio fake-outs of all time. And he's just blended a lot of different stories into sort of a tribute to fakery, and it's edited like a motherfucker, just to underscore that.
Right. So I guess we can go around and give each of our impressions of the movie. This is my first time seeing it. Although, as you said, it has a reputation. I had heard of it. So I guess, I actually wasn't crazy about this movie. I definitely see how it was groundbreaking and that kind of thing. But I think also watching it now, it almost seems I think it feels like it's more clever than it really is. And I don't know, maybe you guys can convince me otherwise. But the first half hour of this movie, I honestly barely had an idea of what the heck was going on. And then when I started to get into it, I actually did really kind of get into the story of the guy who does the fake paintings. And it does bring up some of the questions of, what's wrong with, why is what he's doing valued less? And if he can kind of mimic the exact same, style as another painter who's famous and whose paintings are worth millions, why isn't his worth anything? And that kind of stuff was kind of interesting. But it is very just all over the place with the editing, and it does get a little bit confusing at times. And I liked the tone of it. It had this kind of playful tone with Orson Welles narrating a lot of it, and I liked kind of the magic sort of theme or metaphor he used at the beginning and the end. But yeah, overall, it was kind of a head scratcher for me. What do you say, Kurt?
Well, I'll confess that leading up to this podcast, I watched the movie 5 times, so it's pretty safe to say that wow. I'm a fan of this movie. I just find this thing endlessly mesmerizing. I get so as I said before, I saw it for the first time only a year ago, but now that I've got a copy of it and I can watch it at home, and it plays really well on the small screen. But yeah, I just watch it over and over again. I love the rhythm of the movie, and I love that Wells sort of, he handholds you without condescending to you. You feel like you're at a dinner table, and you are many times over this movie, like you're at a dinner table with him and you're just getting these absolutely awesome anecdotes. But then when you pull back a little bit, you realize this thing is just crazily structured. I mean, the amount of work that must have went into this, and he sits... Like it constantly reminds you that it's edited because he's sitting in the editing room with one of those really old, like, upright moviolas. And I don't know if this movie was edited on a moviola. It might have been. I mean, some of the footage is pretty raw. But anyway, I love film editing, and this movie is like one of the ultimate tributes to film editing.
All right, Jay.
I had seen it previously, and I rewatched it for the Movie Club podcast,
which we are doing,
which
right
we're
now.
currently doing. We're recording it.
Yes.
And I agree with Kurt. I think that this movie is awesome, and it's, I can see how maybe it's confusing on a first watch, but I think it's pretty, I think it's pretty, once you get past all of this sort of backtracking and playfulness of Wells saying, you know, oh, here are these details, but before we get into that, I should backtrack and we should do this. And then once we're done that, well, let's jump ahead to this. And I mean, I think he's pretty clear in, how playful he's being in the structure. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't, spoon feed you, but it's not, totally unfollowable. It's like, he's clearly telling you when they're taking these tangents, but even still, you have to keep up with them taking these tangents. Like it's very structured chaos, I guess, and they're informing you as you go that this is going to get chaotic, and you know, now we're here, but before we go there, we're going to go here. And I think if you just stay focused on the main track, everything that's happening around it doesn't really matter. It's all just kind of playful dialogue and winks to the camera and whatnot. I think the story itself is pretty straightforward and easy to follow. It's just presented in a very flamboyant style, and it's fun. I mean, it's got magic in it.
That's true. It does have magic.
It's got some great imagery in it, and some great stories, and just the way he speaks throughout the film is I think it's I agree, it's a mesmerizing experience.
All right, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed this one a lot. I'm glad to hear other people saying that the editing was, you know, what struck them as really interesting about the film, because that was what I took away from it, was just how frenetic and strangely it was edited. It was almost edited in a way, it reminded me of those kind of real, like, operatic, like those epic kung fu movies that, they're just that sort of slam bang editing that they have in those. And it definitely added to the film, and Wells, proves himself to be a master of the form again. Only this time, just this film, through its editing and the way it's presented, just constantly causes you to question the validity of authenticity in art, how important authenticity is, and I think it went to a lot of very interesting places and was well done.
Marina?
I'm kind of with you on this one, Sean. I really liked it, but I had some issues with the first half hour. I scratched my head and I thought for sure that maybe I'd fallen asleep and kind of missed something, and then it kind of picked up. But the first 20 minutes or so, I was just so confused. What's going on? Who are these people?
Yeah.
It was just all over the place for me. But once the story sort of picked up and things started getting interesting, you're talking to Elmire, and then you've got Clifford Irving involved, and things just get weirder and weirder. It gets really, really interesting, and I really wish the movie had been longer and that we'd had a chance to explore these characters a little bit further. Because as it sort of feels like a stream of consciousness. Like, you sort of have this idea and you're going along and sharing this idea, and you're like, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you this part. So let's tell you this part. So I could see the editing, and yeah, it's really interesting, and I appreciate that. And, for me, it's not really the reason for me to watch the film, but it is really entertaining once you get past, once you go in and sort of experience. I think my problem was I was expecting a documentary, and that's not really what I got. And it took me a few minutes to sort of get myself into the mindset to watch this. Then once I was there, I really enjoyed it. So I think on a second viewing, it might be even more enjoyable. I would love to watch the extras on this disc. I really liked it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the extras on the disc, if you want to see how you can compare how Wells handles the story versus your typical made-for-television documentary filmmaker, just have a look at the bonus documentary that is included on the second disc, and you'll see, what happens to this story when it's in the hands of someone who decides to approach it with that frenetic style, and someone who just decides to throw some talking heads in there with stock footage and shots of paintings.
But the extra on the disc, it's not directed by Francois Reichard or whatever the guy's name is. It's not his use of the footage, is it?
It's the documentary on the disc is from 1997, I think.
Okay, so it's recent.
But it uses footage from F for Fake that they claim is from a BBC archive. So I don't know if the footage that is in F for Fake was actually shot by that filmmaker, or if they were using stock footage on top of the footage that was shot for F for Fake.
Because the fascinating thing about all three of these films, and we'll get into the other two later, but all three of them started out with the filmmakers making one film, and that film coming to a halt or changing direction radically and becoming something totally different. I mean, in hindsight, I don't think we saw that going in. We were more looking at the fake, real documentaries. But here are three filmmakers. I get the sense that Wells... Marina, you say it's frenetic and you wish you wanted more, and I just don't think there was any more to give. I think that this French filmmaker, who's the art collector former art dealer in the movie, that started making this documentary on Ibiza, or in Ibiza, on Elmire and Clifford is sort of, Irving is in there in the background. I don't think he finished this. I think he just gave whatever footage he had to Wells, and Wells rolled it up with a bunch of other footage that he had and turned a movie out of a bunch of different parts, because the girl watching thing is actually like a short film by Oya Kodar, almost like a feminist film but he slips it in there. And then the magic, and then there's stuff with the guy from Manchurian Candidate. There's this one magic trick. I think it's from one of his failed film projects. So he's injected that in there. And one of my favorite things about what he does in F for Fake is he makes Elmire and Clifford have conversations with each other that it's obviously
edited,
different interviews, and he amplifies the ticking clock to emphasize them hiding something. I mean, it is the F for Fake is almost not about the guy who are doing hoaxes or anything. It's completely about how I can make things happen by just razor sharp editing and putting a voiceover to patch it all up and making it go fast enough that it feels like It is like I mean, the magician stuff is totally warranted. It feels like Wells is doing shaking his right hand all over the place while he's doing things with his left hand. Because when you watch this movie 4 or 5 times in a week, you realize that there are elements every time, like someone says the word fake or the word hoax or whatever, Oya pops her head in. Like, she's like right in front of the restaurant. She drives by. I mean, there's even a scene when Elmire is talking about his time in America, and you see this woman walking by, and it's just some woman walking by, but it echoes the girl watching stuff later. I don't know how long they spent putting this together, but it really does feel like a lot of these almost found footage in its own way has been poured over in intricate detail to make things like a piece of music. Like it goes up and it goes down and it calls back on itself, but it doesn't do it in a way that a movie normally does. It is going so fast and it's breezing by so fast that it's just not a movie you see everything the first time. Like any con man movie, you don't really see. The whole point of a con man movie is to watch one movie the first time and a totally different movie the second time. And this one operates on 4 or 5 levels of that.
And I see where you're coming from, but I think that might be one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it, but it's not something that I'm going to be revisiting all the time. Because I was more interested in hearing more about the people. I wanted to hear more about Elmire. I wanted to know more about Clifford Irving. I wanted documentaries on those people. And that's not really what he's giving us to begin with. But when I was watching it, that's what I wanted. And so, I mean, yeah, I enjoyed the film, and, you know, he gave me a bunch of really cool stuff that I really enjoyed watching, and I love the way that he's built it. And I like this idea of making a film about fake stuff, because, I mean, that's all... I shouldn't say that. We'll take that back. But, I mean, I like the idea of a movie about fakery, like you say. But it's not really what I wanted to see at the end of it. Like, I enjoyed it, but I wanted more. And what I wanted more of is not something that he was even offering up to begin with.
Has anyone watched the Lasse Hallström movie, The Hoax? Which is... Yep. I couldn't get it in time to watch it for this show. Is it an interesting side feature? Because it is the whole movie is on Clifford Irving, right?
Is that the Richard Gere?
It's what's his name? Richard Gere hasn't really done anything good in a number of years, and he was actually very good in that film. And it's an interesting story to begin with, and he's built a fairly interesting little movie too. But yeah, I guess it's like a nice addition to this. And I think maybe watching this, I kind of thought, ooh, Clifford Irving. Maybe I'm going to get more of the real Clifford Irving. And it didn't materialize. But that's not really what he's getting at anyways, right? It's just these are the characters that he's built into this movie about fakery in general. So it just wasn't what I was expecting, really. But I still really enjoyed it.
I think like that's one of the things that confused me a little bit too, is it's like he's introducing these characters, and as you're starting to figure out, okay, who is this guy? What's the story behind him? But because it's not, a standard documentary, you don't really get, the setup, all the information you need. And then when the cutting and stuff starts happening and you're trying to figure out, well, does this even matter? Like, he's more concerned with playing around with the editing and sort of proving, he's more concerned with showing you his point than actually explaining his point, if that makes any sense. So like it's I guess it's like the medium is the message kind of thing, you know what I'm saying? Like and that's cool, but then when there is interesting stuff in there, it's frustrating because you're like trying to extract things from it, and that's not really the point. That's not what he wants to show you.
Exactly.
But I think the closest and most obvious comparison you can make this in terms of this film to modern documentary filmmaking, aside from the two that we're going to be talking about, is Dear Zachary. And that movie uses the same sort of pop. It's like they're both kind of pop art films. The editing itself is an important piece of both projects, and you could say I think a lot of people that had complaints about Dear Zachary are coming from the same perspective, in that it's like, okay, you've got this great crime story with this huge emotional twist, but it's being presented to me as a, this sort of like soundbite remix sort of fashion that it's distracting and it's not allowing me to get into the story. And it's like, well, that's what is interesting about it. I mean, yes, you could. I mean, I saw the Dear Zachary story retold on an episode of 2020 or whatever it was, and it was not the same story. I mean, it just felt like every other murder mystery that you'd see on any news magazine show. So losing, I think, some of that spark and some of that identity that Dear Zachary has really affected the story, in my opinion. And I think that this movie is designed similarly, and it works on a more visceral level. And I think the way the film is delivered works perfectly with the story. I think you're constantly questioning things. And I mean, the very beginning of the movie, Orson Welles tells you, I promise you that what you're going to see is 100% true for the next hour. And then as soon as he says that, you get a shot of the word fake coming down, like scrolling down. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that he's lying? That's fake? It's playful in that way. And I think that while there is an interesting story there that could be handled by a great filmmaker in a very traditional manner, I'd be worried that, it might lose some of its charm if it's just taken to talking heads. Well, like the extra, like not the extra I didn't actually finish watching it. And it's not horrible, but it's like, I don't know, some of the thrill of the way it was presented in F for Fake is a little more interesting, in my opinion.
And keep in mind that F for Fake was being filmed right in the middle of all of this. So right in the middle of the reaction to, when Irving shows Elmire a newspaper article from the London Times, it's like that weekend's London Times. So, I mean, the reaction to his book, Fake, is still immediate. And then Clifford's subsequent run through with the Howard Hughes thing is all going on at the same, within this same year. And so this French guy was making this, what I assume to be conventional documentary, and they got at some footage, but it went off the rails probably with Irving going to jail, and Elmire committed suicide the next year, and so they just never had I don't think they had a traditional doc. Like, you need a certain level of narrative.
But that can always be provided by this expert and that expert.
Sure, you could this, talking head it to death.
Widow and that widow, and
in some ways, F for Fake plays well as a talking heads documentary. It's just that the heads look like they're talking to people that they're not talking to, and Orson Welles comes in to patch things up. But he doesn't patch things up like a normal hack voice over does. He starts reading Kipling in the middle, and that's a wonderful piece of verse that he reads. And it's actually in the Banksy film you see I don't know if it says is it pretty, but you do see a huge caption, is it art? See him watching those two films back to back. I'm like, whoa, like that's, and that's always the fundamental thing with art is, where does art get its significance? It gets significance from what's attributed to it. And how does it get significance attributed to it? Well, people have to talk about it, or people have to be taken in by it. And that has to stay around for a while. And in a way, I think, Welles is not looking to make a film. It is now, I think, considered a high piece of art documentary filmmaking. But at the time, it felt more like he was making a prank film, like a film that was when it was in itself a hoax, and just trying to be playing with the idea of, well, how do you make a film that would fool people? There have been a lot of them. There's been. What's the Forgotten Silver is another one. I
was going to say, to me, I was kind of expecting more something like that, more like Forgotten Silver. And, I don't know if when this movie first came out, if people would have watched it and taking it more at face value. And maybe that's part of the problem, is that like nowadays anybody watches just a standard documentary and they're like looking at it going, that's fake, that didn't happen. They're trying to tear it apart. And like, obviously we're watching this movie under a certain theme, and I'm already thinking, okay, this movie's going to play around with stuff. And like, it almost feels like the movie would work better if you had actually taken, you know, the first hour at face value, and then he's got kind of the last story that's not true, and there's kind of that twist, and like, to me, that wasn't a big surprise. Like, oh, okay, that wasn't true. Like, was anything true? Like, I was not even, that was part of the problem, is like some of those stories in there are real. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, is any of this real? Like, I didn't know.
But the big thing is, and I think this is with documentaries in general, is, to me, it really doesn't matter. I'm not looking for movies to tell the truth, but if they get at some fundamental truth, even if they lie their head off, like, you know, which I think all of these movies do to a degree, you know, but bottom line is, if they tell me something interesting, if they show me something interesting, I could care less whether they're true or not. I mean, like that, I was saying before we started recording, that James Frey novel with Oprah, and people threw a huge fit about, you know, when it came out that he wasn't a recovering addict, he just made the book up. I mean, it's still a good read. You know, I just don't understand what people want. Like, how does it being true give resonance? I know a lot of films put, you know, based on a true story or whatever. I mean, even some filmmakers like the Coen brothers put it on films that are not, even to give it a level of authenticity.
Return
like
of the Living Dead was based on a true story.
Exactly. But, you know, these things, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. If it ultimately is what the movie is saying. And I think Wells in this movie starts to get at that with the church. I love the scene where he shows that huge church in France, and it's photographed from all these different angles, and he's saying, you know, like, there's no one's name associated with this. It's just a bunch of anonymous craft people that were probably bullied by the church into building it, you know, to a degree. I mean, and yet here is this thing, and it's as beautiful and awe-inspiring as looking at a Picasso or you know, any number of the paintings that are real or fake in this, and you're not worried about whose name on it. Whereas with the dollars in F for Fake, everyone is concerned about whose name is on it, and even whether or not they can arrest Elmire and send him to jail is based on whether or not someone witnessed him signing it. It's totally fine for him to paint things in other people's style. There's nothing wrong with that. But as soon as it's the signature that is the big thing in question. And then there's all these side plots in the movie about forged passports and the forged Howard Hughes handwriting. And you know, it's just wonderful that you look at these things and say, you know, none of this really matters. If you look at that painting and it's excellent, and it brings you some level of joy or fulfillment or makes you think about something, like that's what art does, then who cares? And I think by presenting F for Fake a bit like a farce, I mean, it's narrated like a farce. It's narrated like a magic show. Not that a magic show is a farce, but I mean, there's just sort of that stage showmanship which you don't consider with high art. You think high art is dignified and it hangs well lit in a gallery, whereas this is full carnival, like the way this movie is made. And, you know, ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as people take value out of it.
It's presented like an anecdote that, like, I don't think it's any accident that we see a lot of footage of Orson Welles sitting at a table with people ordering food and telling the people what's happening, and then having him in his narration, like I said before, saying, oh, wait, let me backtrack to this and that. Like, the way that the narrative is laid out is very conversational, in that it goes into places, it has tangents, and it has moments where he almost loses his train of thought or something and has to retrace his steps. And I mean, when you're dealing with the structure of a film, like, obviously you can work around that. It's not like, you know, he wrote the narration and was like, oh, I went too far, but I got to stick with it. So I got to backtrack.
Nope.
Like, it's obviously designed to feel like someone telling a story at a dinner table. And that's how stories are told at dinner tables. It's like, oh, I forgot this one detail. Let me backtrack. It's like, this guy did this and I think that's the fun of it. Like it works in that way that you've got like this master storyteller, you know, with you wrapped around his finger and telling the story how he wants to tell it. And it just so happens that the story kind of works thematically with that presentation. I think it's a very interesting way to tell a real story. And it's an interesting take on documentary filmmaking. Like, you know, whatever you would want to call this film. I guess it's like a visual essay or something. But it is a documentary. I mean, I think I would feel comfortable calling it a documentary, and I would feel comfortable saying it's a very unusual one that really plays with the form years before it was popular to play with the form.
Well, he makes that joke somewhere, I think it's quite early on in the film, is that a magician is an actor playing the part of the magician. And people often say that, well, I've heard it, I don't know who said it first, but it comes up anytime someone debates the truth in documentary, is that, you know, a film itself is a documentary of the filmmakers making the film, even though it's completely artificial. So, you know, really the line is, as I don't know when or who got the stupid idea that documentaries have this air of truth. And I find it really refreshing. Now, obviously Wells was way ahead of the curve on this, but I find it refreshing that, you know, 20 something years later, I mean, the whole documentary, you know, sort of separated documentary industry has come to embrace the fact that let's let it all hang out there. Like, documentaries don't have to be aiming for this authoritative, truthful voice. They can embrace, you know, truthiness and just graft on whatever they want and do whatever they want in the spirit of telling their story. If they have to have an actor stage a little bit or do a little bit, if it's in service of telling the overall story, that's, I mean, that happens. It's happened since the first documentary.
As long as they're sincere about what they're doing.
Correct. Well, I see it, but that's part of the problem is, like, how do you know if they're sincere, right? And I mean, we'll probably get into this a little bit with Catfish, but I think, like, it is an interesting question. Like, I mean, that's probably really what we're talking about with all of these movies. Like, does it matter if they're true or not? And I mean, I think F for Fake is a little different than the other two because you're right. It's very playful the whole time. And like I said, I don't think I ever for once thought any of it was true. And maybe that was part of a problem for me because I kind of just thought it was all kind of hoaxy, made up stuff. And the twist at the end when he kind of, you know, reveals that, you know, the last story was completely made up. And it kind of feels like that's supposed to be some big reveal when to me it really wasn't. But at the same time, like, you know, I agree. I don't necessarily think a documentary has to be true in order to be significant or effective in any way. And I guess, yeah, it's like, why? I don't know. Why is that? Why do people care? I guess because they feel swindled themselves. Like, they feel like stupid because they got tricked if they find out after the fact that something wasn't real or something like that.
Well, in fiction film, it's all about suspension of disbelief. Once a film has lost me, I find, like, I'm talking like a totally made up film, science fiction, a fantasy, anything. If a film's lost me, it doesn't have anything to do with the actual truth. It has to do with the universe that is built and whether or not I found the filmmaker could contain everything he stuffed into the sort of rules, expectations, and overall vibe of the universe that he built. And some filmmakers can do that and still break the rules and feel like they're being honest. And then some filmmakers set up a bunch of rules and then ignore them all. And you go, well, why did you set them up in the first place? But these sorts of things are clearly.
You mean the the veracity of the universe? I mean, that the narrative takes place in, that it has to obey its own physics?
I think so. I think it's fair that if I'm watching a fantasy film and they say you have to you have to get this to use these things, or you can only go invisible when the moon is full, and then you see the character going invisible later on in some nonsensical context, you go like, what the hell? It shakes you out of the film. And now there's some filmmakers that can shake you out of the film and still keep you with, wrapped around your finger. But then there's other times when I feel like it's laziness. And,
well, yeah, I mean, I think the documentary truth thing is just dependent. I don't think it's, a blanket statement. I think it does kind of depend on the film, but I think the idea of, rules in a universe apply to documentary filmmaking. Like if you get a film that's, like a Michael Moore sort of film or an issue film or something that's supposed to be an authoritative look at the crisis in Haiti, and then somewhere they slip in that it was all because of, underground society that has a monster that got angry or something. Like you have to keep your reality in check in terms of like how you present your information, I think. But when you get into films that are kind of character studies, and like the point of the film is maybe to just offer a different perspective on life or who we are or whatever, I think it's okay to get creative in how you present that. Or like I guess one movie that recently came out that I haven't seen yet, but I want to see, that really plays with the idea of the documentary, is The Arbor. Have you guys heard of this movie?
I've heard of it.
It's a documentary, if you can call it that, where it's all of the dialogue in the film is pulled from interviews, but they hired actors to come in to sets that they built and everything. And the actors actually lip sync to all of the dialogue. So what you're seeing is completely fake and staged and structured, but what you're hearing is actually, it's like that Creature Comforts animated thing where they have real interviews done with cows.
Claymation.
Claymation.
Well, didn't they, what was that gay, where they hung the gay guy up on the fence? It's like the Laramie Project, I think, was done that way. It was all, it was a talking head documentary with celebrities, but yes, it was all the recorded interviews that they had done, and it totally worked. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really, really does work, because you want the visual information to augment, what the movie is saying, and whether that is captured verite or whether it's staged. I mean, it can work and fail in both. It's just one way of doing it. You can get real footage and it can be terrible, and you can get staged footage and not necessarily work. But obviously, people that know what they're doing and clearly have it in mind what they want to do are more likely to succeed, whether it's actual footage or highly staged footage.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person you're talking to. I think, documentary purists can get pretty picky about what they consider to be true documentary filmmaking. Like, you throw in some lights and suddenly it's not true. And, you ask someone to sit near a window so that you can get better lighting on their face, and suddenly you're manipulating reality. And that stuff is just, I think, is a waste of time. But, I mean...
Good lighting's a waste of time?
No, the analyzing that stuff and making accusations that's somehow tainting the
well,
film.
As soon as you put a camera in there,
exactly.
That's it's the whole what is it, the Einstein cat in the box experiment.
Equals MC squared.
No, the cat. I'm not going to let you do what you did to Jerry to me when he brought up Einstein. But no, like you affect the experiment by looking at it. As soon as you look at something, it ceases to be what it was when you weren't looking at it. I think that's the camera
Einstein.
is exactly. You're right. It's Schrodinger. Thank you. But yeah, that's absolutely true with a camera. And even like the fake docs have a great understanding of that. I mean, even like the BBC version of The Office, the way some of the characters, like, it's really interesting acting in BBC's Office, because the characters are in a fictional show pretending to be real people, pretending to be affected because there's a camera there. I always found that sort of thing very interesting. And so, I mean, the fact is that people have cameras pointed at them all the time. So I think that the actors in particular have no trouble doing that triple layer. It's almost natural at this point that everyone is filmed at some time and whatever, and obviously actors and that are even more. But it is fascinating now that we have many. I guess Christopher Guest started it, or even Peter Watkins. But Peter Watkins' subjects in all those films that he made, they're not playing up to the camera the way in the Christopher Guest films, the way the characters play up to the camera like it's there. But either way, I mean, I guess we've tangented off, but as soon as you point a camera at someone, it's no longer documentary. So therefore, documentaries cannot exist.
I mean, it just comes down to the fact that I think documentary filmmakers should be allowed to use the same tools that fiction filmmakers can use. They should be able to use visual metaphors and, just ways to get the point across. Like if you're, I mean, the laziest example is that, if something tragic happened to someone and you bring them to the place where it happened, and that's a way of getting them to talk about it, and then they'll have an emotional response. Whereas if you just interviewed them in a shopping mall as they're shopping, their mind is elsewhere. And it's like you're affecting their what they're going to say, and by purposely taking them to this place that they otherwise probably wouldn't be walking around, and getting them to respond to it. And that's kind of the Dateline NBC way of doing things. But I think that's the idea, is that whatever you have to do to maybe have summarize an emotion or some sort of exposition in terms of the story to make it a little more interesting for the viewer, like get a point across that's more visually, like the example that always comes up is in Gates of Heaven, in Errol Morris's film, where the one son who's got this sort of attitude that he's this perfectionist and he's this motivational speaker guy, but he's actually under the younger brother who's higher in the chain at the cemetery where the family run cemetery. Errol Morris has him in this office that's just full of trophies everywhere, and it's his trophy room, when in reality those trophies were all in the attic, and Errol Morris asked him to bring them down, and they basically set decorated. And it's like a lot of people would be put off by that. Like, that's not real. He didn't have all those trophies out, but fine, it's not real, but they are his trophies, and it is a hell of a visual to summarize this guy's true, attitude
within the frame
in one shot. And that's a piece of filmmaking. It's a filmmaking tool that I think documentary filmmakers should be allowed to use. I mean,
it's funny you mentioned that film, though, because that film is constantly compared to, I don't know if it predates Spinal Tap or if it postdates Spinal Tap, but it's constantly compared to Spinal Tap because these characters behave like that legitimately. They're not actors faking like they have cameras on, so they're puffing themselves up. These are people puffing themselves up because they're being filmed. And I don't know. I mean, I find Spinal Tap works and Gates of Heaven work. So
yeah.
Well, and maybe this is going to derail the conversation even more, but you're talking about documentary filmmakers should be able to use all the tools that fictional filmmakers can use.
Speed ramping, bullet time.
Sure. But I think, then the issue becomes, well, can documentary films then be judged basically on the same merits that a fictional film can be judged, which, meaning if I didn't like a particular character or if I didn't like a particular scene in a documentary, can I then say, I didn't like that documentary because I didn't like that scene or I didn't like those characters?
No.
But then the argument is always, but that's real. That's what happened. So,
yes, you should be able to do that. That's the problem. The problem is that people watch the movie about the guy who's slowly dying of AIDS, and it's shot like a piece of shit, and it doesn't do any justice to this guy's story at all. And the filmmaker has no fucking clue what they're doing. And the film comes out, and it gets 98% on Rotten Tomatoes because people don't have the balls to say the movie about the real man dying of AIDS sucked ass. I mean, yes, you should be able to review a documentary film in that fashion, I think. But I mean, you should also keep in mind, when we talked about Restrepo, I wasn't blown away by Restrepo, and I completely realized that the filmmakers were in danger when they were filming it. the people in the film are putting themselves in these situations. They're defending their country, and it's very, honorable, and it's, something I'm not doing. But I don't think that means I can't say, like, I didn't find the film as good as everyone else did, or I wish that, the scene where they were getting shot at, I wish I could have seen a little better. I wish that they would have stopped hiding.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, it's a tough thing, but that's the problem. Like, documentaries are just given passes because they deal with real subjects, and people automatically, it's almost like it has to look like shit or else it's not real,
Yeah. Well, I guess, like, just to get back to F for Fake a little bit, like, we were already talking about how, like, a lot of people aren't even calling it a documentary. People are calling it a quote-unquote film essay. But to me, it's like, well, what's the difference? Like, isn't a documentary a film essay for the most part? Like, I mean, I guess it depends. Like, maybe story-based documentaries aren't as much. But, certainly a Michael Moore movie is a film essay, I would say. So, I don't know. It's just kind of weird that there's this distinction that people are drawing there.
I think it's just, I would be comfortable calling it a documentary. I mean, it's
certainly
like the thriller versus horror.
Certainly as much as Exit Through the Gift Shop, which is nominated for Best Documentary at the Oscars.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that, people want a documentary to be just the facts, ma'am. And the Michael Moore and F for Fake come across as more of an editorial, so people parse them that way. I don't believe it's valid, but I do believe that you look at the op-ed page in the newspaper different from the front page or the world news section. You treat it. I guess the chief fallacy of people watching many people watching documentaries or people critiquing documentaries is that they spend a lot of time critiquing the intentions or the
agenda.
The agenda, when every film has an agenda of sorts, and I mean, like I guess what Jay is saying, I mean, critique how the film is made and does it do justice to the subject, just like you would a fictional film, rather than trying to parse, whether or not this person has a slant or this or that. I mean, I really like Michael Moore's films. I don't. Okay, I understand why he gets the criticism that he gets, but I find the one thing about Michael Moore's films is that they have a real finger on the pulse of a certain outlook of a certain subset of America. Like when you have people going to parades with the little, guys in Shriner cars or goofy Beach Boys songs or whatever. He has a way of, I mean, you can argue whether or not it's real, but who cares whether it's real? The point being is he's found a way to tell the story of some cultural niche within America, and I like that. There's not a lot of other people doing it, and he does it very, very well. I mean, there's obviously a number of imitators, the chief among them being Morgan Spurlock, who's terrible at it.
Although I am curious about his new movie. I read some stuff about it, and it sounds, I don't know, it could be complete crap, but it sounds
something like the greatest
movie ever sold.
Yeah, but I mean, bottom line is, I just look at everything. Sadly, I get criticized for it myself, of looking at everything through like sort of an auteur sort of lens. And, Michael Moore is an auteur filmmaker. You can tell right away, besides his presence being in it, that you're watching a Michael Moore film. And, I mean, I wouldn't say F for Fake feels like every other Orson Welles film, but Orson Welles was one of those filmmakers that shifted genre and style quite like a Kurosawa or a Kubrick. I mean, he whatever he did very, very well, and he always wanted to do different things. And for this movie being his swan song, obviously barring Transformers the movie,
that was definitely a swan song.
This movie feels like the culmination of his career. All of the stuff that he does, on the radio and Touch of Evil and Citizen Kane, and he injects himself right into the movie. So in a way, it is his story. This is my career. This is what I did all of my career. And I find this shit interesting. And he's like, and I'm willing to share this with you. I'm willing to hold your hand and take you with me. And, even if he's nudging you in the ribs a few times, it's like, it's no fun unless you're being nudged in the ribs a few times. I don't go to a magician show to figure out how the magician did it. I'm amazed by the showmanship is the reason for watching magic. And
Jay's nodding his head.
Oh, okay, I'm getting a lot of head nods over there. But any magician that I watch, I just love to watch what they do. And yeah, okay, you do play the game of how did he do it, and for fake, I think you can start to understand the craft of how it was done. But when I rewatch it again and again, it's not so that I learn more of how he made it. I just like being swept up in that energy of just pure filmmaking. Like, I mean, he's made a fake film, and a fake film where he's telling you he's making a fake film in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I can certainly see this as being like a movie that you'd show to, film school students and be like, you know what, like, you're in first year film, and it's like you want to see how editing can manipulate stuff and like the power of cinema or whatever. Like, this movie clearly demonstrates.
Do you want to know where Tony Scott and Michael Bay came from? They probably watched this movie a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, maybe that's the other thing too, is that some of this stuff, some of the editing and just the idea that you can manipulate stuff is like, it feels so much more commonplace now that I think this would have been, I hate always saying that, but like, it probably would have been a lot more mind blowing when it first came out. Still very cool now, but So any other thoughts on F for Fake before we move on here?
I just thought another terrific thing about the film was the presence of Wells had, and he's so self-conscious as both the director and the narrator in this one that I thought it was really terrific to see him kind of aware of this kind of bizarre, larger-than-life presence he had in this film. I mean, some of the ridiculous things he was doing, like the bit where he rubbed red wine behind his ears and things like that. I think he was like well aware that he's kind of a bit ridiculous, and he has a lot of fun at his own expense.
He's rocking a cape for most of the movie.
Yeah.
Which I can't believe was cool in 1975 either.
He made it cool.
He did. Well, okay, here's a quick poll. Who has, like, I think Wells in this movie has the sexiest voice ever. He doesn't narrate the entire film, but he narrates a huge chunk of it. And, you look at all of his films that he's a character in, and all the films he acting in, and yes, even Transformers the movie.
Why do you think they chose him for Unicron? Come on
voice. Now. And I don't know, is he the sexiest movie voice? I mean, the only other big, deep, sexy movie voice I can think of is Keith David. I mean, who's the sexiest movie voice out there ever?
I like that in the film version of A Brief History of Time, that Stephen Hawking kind of mechanical voice.
That is pretty sexy, yeah.
It gets you hard, does it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. His voice is pretty commanding and awesome.
But it's strange that usually the deep, commanding voice is sort of an authoritative voice, whereas in this it's like a dinner companion voice. And I mean, deep down, I think he is using the authoritativeness to do something, but it doesn't feel, like usually a deep voice would be used in a movie. Like, usually a deep voice movie just tells you facts, endless facts, whereas this one's not quite the same. But nonetheless, I think if you had a different person, without Wells as the on-camera, like if Wells directed it and had another actor in there, I don't know if this, I mean, you can never know, but I think that his presence, I think you're right, James, his presence is so fundamental to the on-screen nature of the movie. And he does disappear for long periods of time, but every now and again he'll pop back in at his moviola or in that hall of mirrors. Like, there's some wonderful visual, like they're almost non sequitur visual shots. Like, there's just one of him walking down the street and you get all the reflections and all the panes of glass of him as he's talking, and then I don't know, there's 5 or 6 shots where they just go out of their way to do something interesting visually, whereas, you know, a huge chunk of this movie looks like ass too. Like, it's really grainy 16, like, it's multi-film stock kind of thing. It's the nature of the beast because they're pulling from all sorts of different movies. But I think it was pretty ballsy to do all those freeze frames on 16 millimeter. I don't know what an audience in the mid 70s would take that crazy number of, I mean, freeze frames are certainly not new, but, you know, 30 of them a minute is very, very new.
Yeah, well, I mean, they would have been used in a lot of, like, 70s cop movies and stuff, I guess, and maybe that's, you know.
Well, what was the first movie that, I think the first movie I saw that did it was The Wild Bunch, but maybe it's even older, where during the opening credits, they would just, you know, the guys would be walking around and it would just freeze frame and turn into a photo and put the credit over top. I mean, that's definitely a 70s thing, I think. Yeah, but well, The Wild Bunch was like 1970 or in that era, I think. I just don't know if anyone did it before. I mean, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is in the 60s. Does it do it? I'm not sure if the whole credits is animated.
Well, it does it when they introduce the good, the bad.
It does? I wasn't sure if that was all, like, it fades to cartoon or whatever. I just don't know.
Well, not in the actual opening credits, but when each character is introduced in the film, it'll freeze frame and it'll say, like, you'll hear that I, and it'll say who they are.
All right. Okay, so should we move on? I mean, we have 2 other movies here.
So keep it going, Sean.
All right, well, let's jump into actually through the gift shop then, because I think the 2 are pretty closely related. A lot of comparisons have come up between the 2. And this is, of course, directed by Banksy, although that is kind of even up for debate, I think, a little bit. So it's basically a documentary about street art, but it's told from the point of view of a guy who gets into the scene, starts interviewing people and following them around as they're doing their art. But then the movie slowly morphs into becoming about him. And he actually becomes an artist himself. So that guy's name is Terry Guetta.
Fader? Oh.
And his art name is Mr. Brainwash. So, and I think part of the thing with this movie, I mean, I had heard from the very start, that this movie was, like, either fully fake or partially fake, so I don't know where I heard it first, but that, like, I knew right off the bat that there was something up with this movie. Whereas a lot of people apparently went in, watched this movie, and just took it as a straight up documentary about street art, nothing weird or fake about it. And I find that kind of hard to believe, but I guess if you hadn't been tipped off, it does play fairly straight for the most part. And so I guess my personal opinion, I think this movie's a lot more interesting knowing that it's fake and assuming that most of it is fake and manufactured. I think as a straight-up street art documentary, it's decent, but I don't think that's what makes it interesting. Kurt, thoughts?
Okay, so I saw it for the first time on DVD when it came out a couple weeks ago. I know Gamble, who's not here tonight, is a huge fan of this movie. He's been sort of talking about it on many episodes of the Row 3 Cinecast. And I don't know what my expectations were. I actually, when I heard the title, I thought it was more about just sort of the commercialization of art. And it is about that. It is very, very much about that. But I don't know. To me, the movie works because it plays as the ultimate pastiche farce of the art world, even far more. It feels like a spiritual remake of F is for Fake. I don't think it's as fun or sophisticated, or it feels itself like it wants to not play with you in the same kind of nice way that Wells wants to play with you. It wants to really keep its cards a little closer to its vest. But I don't know. I don't think the film's all that well made. Whereas F for Fake looks cheap, but is extremely well crafted. This movie, I don't know. I almost feel it has the same thesis. Like, for the first hour, they're telling you the truth, and then it just becomes some wild fantasy for the thing. And that doesn't make it bad. I mean, it has, I think, a lot to say about, how eventually, how art is always made by people borrowing elements, and that's why there's always this argument for the public domain, so people can keep building on it. But I think this film looks at the art world as a snake eating its own tail, and the snake is eaten right around so that there's actually nothing left. Because, I mean, this guy's parroting Warhol, who was parroting someone else, and I think, like the argument we had before, what the documentary has to say, I think, is more interesting in Exit Through the Gift Shop than how it goes about saying it. So.
Okay. Jay?
I think that this movie is interesting because it actually, F for Fake, looks at the value of art and the role of art dealers and putting a price on art and the signatures and all of this stuff. But this film actually looks at it criticizes the art itself, which I found interesting, especially seeing as it's coming from a street artist that's very popular.
Right.
And I can't say I'm a huge fan of a lot of the art in the film, even the stuff that's supposed to be considered amazing art. So I thought it was interesting once you get to the last third of the film and Mr. Brainwash puts on this show, and the art is so competent that you could totally see it being passed as, great modern street art. A lot of the stuff would feel very comfortable on a lot of album covers, I think, and no one would question it.
And he did do Madonna's greatest hits
apparently.
album cover.
And I thought that was interesting that, the end of the film, when they kind of say, they're not sure who the joke is on or if there's a joke at all, and Banksy gives this comment about never helping or not wanting to encourage everyone to do art anymore. It's like the opposite theme that Ratatouille had about cooking. I thought that was a pretty interesting and ballsy message to end the film on. It's like the total downer ending if you're an artist, I think. I would imagine it would make you kind of reconsider what your own art means and your own approach to art and your favorite artists and
right.
And I think the movie, it's not as well crafted as F for Fake, but it's a very fun and watchable movie. It just carries itself along in a completely palatable way that I think practically anyone could. It's like Spellbound or something. You could sit and watch it. You don't have to be necessarily interested in the subject matter. Maybe a little bit more here in the first third, but the characters are engaging enough to hold your interest, and I think the promise of some unusual terrain is a good one, like to keep you hooked to the screen.
James?
I had mixed feelings about this movie. I guess I came into it completely ignorant of the whole deal. I have seen the Andre the Giant stickers around, but I'd never heard of Banksy or had any idea about this whole street art thing. I mean, I guess I've seen this kind of thing around, so I know something like it exists, but I really didn't know anything about it, and I'm starting to feel a little nervous that I might be one of the hoodwinked masses. I guess I thought it was pretty much a documentary that kind of had a unique, a unique beginning, and so I guess I feel like there was a sort of level of smugness on the part of the film that didn't sit well with me, and also that the art, I guess Banksy's art and the art that they show at his exhibition where Brad Pitt was and everything there are interesting things to be seen there, but for the most part I found the art really sort of unremarkable and not very stimulating, and I felt like the Mr. Brainwash was kind of a huckster to begin with. I mean, we were introduced to him as this guy who's reselling French tennis shoes as designer originals, or he's talking about selling secondhand clothes or at least seconds as designer wear and that sort of thing. And so it didn't surprise me that the film went where it did, and it didn't make me any more or less cynical about art, just that art kind of exists in this strange place, has this strange place in commerce right now. So, and there are a lot of kind of, things unraveled in the film. But, yeah, I don't know. Overall, I have lukewarm feelings about the film.
Okay, Marina?
Well, I think the joke is on Damien Hirst because he didn't get there first. This is my feeling.
Who's Damien?
There is a joke.
Who's Damien Hirst?
Who's Damien Hirst? Oh my god. He's a British modern artist who he makes stuff that sells for millions and millions of dollars. He's like one of the highest paid modern artists. I think he sold a diamond encrusted skull for like $75 million or something stupid.
Nice.
But it's the same kind of thing. They're making art that I don't really see the point of it. At least Banksy does have, or I think he does have something to say. Some of his art at least has something to say. But I think between Kurt and Jay, I think you guys nailed this on the head, that it really does feel like he's poking fun at his own work, or the fellow people that work with him. Because, I mean, there's a lot of sort of, they're showing you all of this art, but a lot of it really doesn't say much of anything, at least not to me, and not the general public. I think the film is really interesting in that, yes, you can sit down and just anybody can sort of get sucked into the whirlwind of what's going on, because it's a really interesting story, whether it's realistic or not, or real or not, or faked or whatever. But I think it brings up some interesting ideas about the art world, but they're all very cynical. This idea that some dude that has no training, nothing to say, sets up this huge art show, makes all of this money, making substandard stuff that he's not even making himself. He's got a factory of people just shelling this crap out. And none of it says anything about anything. I mean, it demeans the work that the real artists have been doing for, their entire lives.
Aha, but is the act of filming the person making art meaningless and a work of art in and of itself? Like, this is that sort of rabbit hole house of mirrors that you go into with this movie?
Well, I don't think so, because, I think it was you that said it. This one doesn't look anywhere as good as F for Fake does. I don't really see the artistic merit here. Like, I see it in F for Fake. As much as I don't think I appreciated it as much as you guys did. I really enjoyed the film just for what it was and what it said about art and fakery. But the whole thing with editing and stuff, it was there, and I thought, wow, that's cool, but I didn't appreciate it as much as you did, though I noticed that it was there. Here, I didn't see anything outstanding. It's not a particularly nice-looking film. I don't think that by capturing it, they're really saying anything else other than... I don't think that the piece itself is a piece of artwork. I can sort of see where you're going, and it would be totally up Banksy's alley to do something like that, but I really don't think that's... I don't see it here.
But I think
maybe that's just my not understanding modern art.
But I think that's the core of my question about the movie, is that if it is just a straight up documentary about street art, I think it's not, it's decent. I don't think it's anything mind blowing. And I don't see how anyone who went to see this movie believing that it was completely true and not even really understanding or thinking that it was Banksy playing some hoax or something. I don't see how somebody could come out of this movie and be like, wow, best movie of the year. This is like amazing. Like, the interesting thing is the fact that I'm assuming at least part of this movie was constructed by Banksy. I don't know if Terry Guetta is a real guy, if he's a character. I mean, Mr. Brainwash has a website, has been doing work on his own for a few years now. It's like, if it's a hoax, it's a pretty intricate hoax.
My theory on this is that that this Thierry guy was probably filming them for a number of years. At first I thought, well, maybe they just sort of took the footage and edited the voice in, but it's if they did that, it's really well done. But really, I think he followed them around and was filming them for a while, and then at a certain point, I think collectively, a lot of these artists decided to make a crack about how their own industry was becoming commercialized. So I think a huge chunk of Mr. Brainwash's art is done by all the artists that you see in the movie. And what's really funny is that it's so out in the open, because they make it like he's ripping off all of them. But there are several shots in the movie that I think really point to the fact of, here's where the found footage stuff, like, I mean, the channel remote control, I don't even think that this Theory guy is sharp enough to make that channel hopping. Like, that to me is the first, time that Brad Pitt subliminally flashes in the movie, although Brad Pitt is in this movie for a second. But, like in Fight Club, to say something isn't right here. And I think they just keep giving you more signs. It's not to say that, sure, he's a real guy and he has a real family and that's his kids on footage and he probably shot most of that footage, but that it's just like F for Fake. The first hour is fine. And then once we get to his art show, he did probably put on that art show. But there came a point where Theory the man became Theory the exit through the gift shop construct. And then they, it's true, he probably did set up a factory, and there were probably various people. And in those various people, Banksy and the guy who did the Obama posters, who's in the movie a lot, and maybe the Space Invader guy and all these other guys seem to just say, let's have a big laugh. I mean, if you look at Banksy's first installation, it seems pretty clear that this would be the next sort of step.
And I think that's the thing too. It's a Banksy movie. That's the first giveaway. Well,
even more than that is that the film is so, I think, disingenuous in its own like hagiography or whatever the word is of Banksy. Like, the whole thing of Banksy being this super target, and then as soon as you kick into Banksy, he's chronicling like 5 or different, like there's like this Tooth and whatever guy, and then there's all these different Space Invaders, and then there's a woman that's putting up posters, and they're all shown, and then when it gets to Banksy, the fucking soundtrack kicks in. It's like Banksy, and I mean, like that, to me, that editing is F for Fake in a way that it's just, it may not come out on a first viewing, but that there is sort of this really pumping up of Banksy, which I could see an artist like Banksy that accidentally becomes a commercial entity, finding a way to deflate his own ego. I think the movie's cynical, not because these guys want to shit on their own industry. It's cynical as an artist's reflection of getting rich quick by accident. Like, this is how you deflate that.
It doesn't, the thing of, it doesn't matter if it's, them wanting to shit on their own industry. I think it for anyone who's not sold on street art, it does shit on their own industry, whether or not that was their intention or not.
But any good art should hold up to scrutiny. Like, you should be able to make a devil's advocate case. Like, I'm not a big fan of street art either. But I actually find the most interesting thing to me about the street art is the performance art aspect of it. The fact that, you got to fly all over the world and it only stays up for a little while and it's completely random. Like, it's not like you go into a gallery. Like, it is now. That's unfortunately what happened to it. But when it was just like, you walk by and you're like, what are all these Obey posters?
That's what
I love
think
that
is cool
stuff.
about it,
I love that stuff. But the actual art itself, it's funny that they never bring up the, what was that, like, or advertising, because about 2 years ago, there was this blitz of movie and book campaign advertising that started to take on street art. And there were those guys from that milk and shake and French fry cartoon. What the hell is it?
Aqua Teen Hunger
Thank you.
Force.
That they were putting up ads exactly like the street art, and they closed a bridge in Boston thinking it was a bomb. And they never. It's funny. I have the same problem with Exit Through the Gift Shop in a way that Marina had with F for Fake. I wanted to find out more about that guy. How did he get from street art to making Obama's campaign materials? And I guess that's another documentary.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think this is like when you say, someone who has no idea that there might be this fake element would watch it and just think, oh, this is a substandard documentary on street art. I don't think it matters if if it's fake or not. I don't think it is ever a documentary on street art. It's a documentary about this guy who, it does include street art, and I think it does criticize it to a degree, but it's a film about that guy. It's
right.
that guy's journey.
And that is the interesting story, I think.
But I don't think you have to know that there was some faked element to understand that, okay, this is not a documentary about street art. This is something completely different.
No,
you don't have to be on the inside to understand that there's a statement being made about the art. So I don't think it matters. Like, yeah, it would be more fun to think that it was a hoax. It's more fun to think that they pulled that off and whatnot. But I don't think it's, detrimental to whether or not the film works. I think the film is what it is. It works as what it is, and it's just an added bonus if it's.
I think the thing is, I think some people could watch this and think that Mr. Brainwash is a real guy, and maybe he is.
I think there's no question he is.
Well, okay, but whether or not he was created for this documentary, right? Because he exists now outside of the movie doing his own thing, but whether or not that path...
Well, he did the Madonna album cover before the documentary ever came out.
Right.
I just look at it as, you compare it to I'm Still Here. Casey Affleck was an actor before he did the hoax in that film. They didn't need to create Casey Affleck just to do the hoax. He just agreed to do it because he was in a position to do it.
Right. But so what I'm saying, though, is people will think this guy is real, but never catch on that anything's wrong with his art. Because I think...
No. I think very clearly this... Like, you're saying this is a documentary about that guy. I think it's a documentary about bad art. It just has to show you the journey.
Art. I think it's about art in general, and contemporary art particularly.
But I think it's subtle in how, yes, there is that line at the end where Banksy's kind of like, I don't know what to think about this, and I won't encourage anyone to necessarily... But, I think, people could watch this and see what happens and just think, wow, that's crazy that guy was, so good at his art that he was able to put a crazy show together and sell it all in, one go. I honestly think that's...
It feels to me that the film is... I can imagine the entire film shaking its head in disgust at what's happening on screen. To me, it plays obvious that everyone involved, right down to the crew he's working with, saying they'll never work with him again,
and that he's retarded.
Yeah,
the movie is the most unflattering documentary. Even with this load of gag documentary subjects, there's hundreds of documentaries that you're never quite sure whether the filmmaker is telling the story or just using the person as a real life comic prop. This is probably the strongest documentary I've ever seen for making its subject look like a complete tool. I've not seen that Overnight documentary, but they almost from moment one. He's goofy. He's framed goofy. Everything about what he does. When Banksy says, well, we needed him to document our movement because he was the only one that knew how to do a camera. Cut to him walking into a empty garbage dumpster and going, fuck. It's edited to take itself down. And that is not by, nothing in editing The amount of time it takes to edit stuff, nothing is by accident, which is why I find that film that he made, and I wish, I don't know, does anyone have the super American package? I have the cheap-ass mongrel Canadian DVD, but
it's a lawyer's edit,
yeah,
which
it's
is
not the full thing.
Another sort of hint that it's a hoax or whatever you want to call it.
That movie, like I wanted to see the 90-minute movie.
It's only 20 minutes on the DVD.
10 minutes, I think.
10 minutes,
and at least four of them are in the film,
right?
But they claim that they couldn't put it on the DVD because of rights issues. But I mean, it's the perfect out that,
absolutely,
it's because it didn't exist. But the moment in the film for me that is the tip off that something is up is when he falls off the ladder and then suddenly he's being wheeled around in a wheelbarrow, and that's the one moment they didn't actually catch on film, and it's shown in stills.
Yeah, but who was around? Like, there's a lot of quaint.
They were around filming him for everything.
Yeah,
I mean the fact that that results in this sort of, again, making him look
like an ass,
it just
like
adds
an idiot.
One other thing to make him look like he's incapable or that he's clumsy or that he's a buffoon. And to me, that moment feels, there's even some, I talked about this on the Film Jump podcast, but I can't remember the actual dialogue, but there's some lines in there that are like Christopher Guest level lines of him saying these ridiculous things about his art and his own, like, delusions of grandeur, and he's completely unaware of how he's sounding and how he comes across, which I don't think is totally there in the first hour of the film. I think in the first hour of the film, yes, he's kind of bumbling and whatnot, but he seems fairly genuine, and it seems like his character does take like he does give into the dark side. And for the first hour, you would never think that guy would give into the dark side, I don't think. But I think it's by design.
Right. And I like that's why I'm saying that I think there's a lot of stuff in the movie that is kind of subtle. Like, I totally agree with you guys. I pick up on all the farcical elements of this movie, but I think there's people who don't. And I think if you don't pick up on the fact that he is goofy and comedic and all that on purpose, then I think you could miss out on a lot of the...
Every great hoax movie fools its contemporary audience and then looks completely stunningly obvious in hindsight. It's just the nature of the beast. But I'll tell you, the dead giveaway in this movie, that it's a hoax, is that when he throws all of his videotapes casually in the thing, he has them elastic band. No one who throws their tapes casually into a bin and doesn't care about them afterwards would bother to, you know how fucking hard it is to like stretch those elastics and turn them to get those rows of tapes? That's obviously intern work.
Well, one other thing...
But just quickly, what is the point of, what if people miss these subtle things in the film? I mean, I don't think it really matters.
No,
I think the story carries itself enough anyways that people can kind of get caught up in other elements.
Yeah,
but
I guess I'm just like saying I think it plays at different levels, and I think it's better on a certain level than, if you missed some of the other stuff. But I guess most movies are probably like that. But one thing I want to mention, I got an email from somebody a while back who the Life remote control movie that we're talking about that was made by Mr. Brainwash or whatever that we seem to think is probably fake. This was from Julian, and he emailed after we talked about it on the Film Junk podcast, but it's interesting. He said there's a YouTube channel for Life remote control that was created in 2006, and it has 3 promotional trailers for it that were all added in 2006. So, I mean, yeah, it's possible that this movie was in production way back then, but his art show didn't happen until 2008.
Way I look at it is the way any good liar comes about doing it is that you take things that have huge built-in chunks of truth. You don't create anything out of the blue. You pull things and you go, yep, that's got a history. Let's slowly meld this. I mean, a film production is a couple years just to get it through post and everything. So you can still be molding things and whatever.
Like just because this exists on a YouTube channel doesn't mean that it was made in the context that it was presented in the film. Like, he might not have even known Banksy or shown it to him. Banksy didn't necessarily say, oh, we got to do something different with this. It could just be, as you said, an element that they can say, oh, well, we could use this and say that was what you had attempted to make, and then I step in and do this. But I mean, when you start talking about that, it starts to sound kind of conspiracy theory, like, you know.
You can still do that over beers.
I mean,
you can do that over beers.
It doesn't matter. Like, that's the thing. It's fun to talk about, and to me, it just doesn't really matter. It's one of the cases where I like I said, it would almost be more fun if it was fake, and that, you know, they pull it all together. But in the end, I don't think it really matters too much.
What did people think of Rhys Ifans' voiceover in this? Because I
loved
mean, but it's knowing, like, it's the way I mean, I love Rhys Ifans as an actor, and he does ultra goofy and total hangdog. Like, he vacillates between those modes, and every moment of this voiceover, to me, when I was watching it, again, you're talking about the theme of the movies that we're doing, and, you know, I'm just coming off several viewings of F for Fake and so forth. But, you know, and that is where he knew that his life would change forever. I mean, like, that voiceover is overbaked. Like, but again, probably by design.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're thinking that this was a, you know, tighten your, you know, button the top button kind of documentary, there's a pretty solid clue that the filmmakers are truly getting their kicks from making this, irregardless of fact or fiction. The documentary, I think, it's not always clear, and often a sense of humor is not always clear. You know, there's so many different flavors of humor, but that voiceover, you know, it ain't the voiceover from F for Fake, which is wonderful, and it's got Wells's voice, and Rhys Ifans' voice isn't quite as imposing, but he does make a lot of it. It's a very good performance in the movie.
Well, I just wanted to bring up something actually that James mentioned earlier. I found it interesting that, James, you thought that this movie had a smugness to it, which I guess I could see that, but I feel like F for Fake has a lot more smugness to it than this movie does, because I think, especially the fact that Banksy in this movie, assuming he's the one who directed it, is a lot more of like a background character, and, you know, he's got the voice changer on, and like he's not. I mean, although you did bring up the point, Kurt, that when he enters the picture, the music changes, and he is treated a little bit like a rock star in this. But I just personally felt like F for Fake had more of a smug tone than this movie did.
Well, I think that when the whole exercise of Mr. Brainwash going through basically turning himself into a kind of phenomenon / artist that Banksy, this status he had during the film, he turned it on its head. He made himself into a phenomenon before he was an artist, and to me, I guess qualitatively, I appreciated Banksy's stuff more than Brainwash. Not much more, but I did. And so turning it on its head like that, with the phenomenon being the same, it causes you to question the legitimacy of the whole thing, right? And at the end, they had that sort of title, or what do you call it, an intercard or whatever, and that said that, you know, Banksy will not make another film about art again, or something like that. It tries to preserve his legitimacy while obviously showing Brainwash to be illegitimate, or at least I felt trying to convince you he was illegitimate, when I'm not really sure that distinction could be drawn between the two of them.
Well, I think the difference is Banksy made the movie and he didn't, but I kind of see your point. But again, it's like, this is kind of what Banksy does. Like, he does art that, you know, messes with people in some way. And
I mean, this movie could have been called, instead of Exit Through the Gift Shop, which obviously hits at the commercialization angle, which is a big part of this movie could have just as easily been called Hype, the movie, because that's really what it is. It's creating, or it's myth making, and you know, the movies are made to make myths. You know, in you know, you print the story of the legend, not the story of the man. I mean, most people like, whether they admit it or not, but deep down, I think most people like big myth-making movies rather than grotty, trying to get at the core truth movies. I mean, you do like to be spun a tale. People like to be fooled. I mean, that's, again, feeds into the magician act. You don't go to a magician to debunk the magician. Have
you been drinking?
You go to a magician to be fooled by. You go in with the
understanding
it's the handshake you make that he's going to fool you. And if he doesn't, then he's fucked up the part of the deal, because you're going in willingly to be fooled. And I don't know. I guess the hype angle plays in this, but I mean, some of Banksy's art and some of his stunts are downright bad. Like, it's embarrassing, the Disney prank in this movie. I think that whole segment should have been cut out of the movie. It's so awfully done. I don't know, maybe some other people can comment on that, but I mean, Disney's an easy target, and I love bashing Disney as much as the next person, but like that Guantanamo stunt, I mean, that was pretty amateur hour all around.
Well, it reminded me of something out of the Yes Men or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the whole film can be looked at as, it's not so much, for me, that scene is not so much like, holy fuck, that says so much to those people on that train. But I think the important thing with that scene is just that the whole thing of him, Mr. Brainwash, being interrogated and not cracking.
Story
it's actually in there for the narrative rather than, but it in a way it
also shows off his work as well.
No, but but badly. Like I mean, maybe they put it in there, you're right, for narrative reasons, and they're like, oh fuck, we'll bite the bullet on this. But that's like even like you said, like with Buddy and the Trophies and Gates of Heaven, like it's the lamestly staged. Like even they could edit what they wanted to show. Like it just looks downright goofy. It doesn't look like it has any social message. Like when you see the blow up doll on the fence and the train going by and them stop the train, it doesn't resonate at all. And no one on that train is looking at it and going, whoa, post 9/11, blah blah blah. Like it's just like someone put a fucking orange suited dummy there. Like it's just bad. That's bad art in there.
But I think it did freak some people out in the sense that they stopped the train and they were like, "What, is there a bomb here?" Or like,
I guess. But again, showing that Disney is a top down controlling fascist organization operating in the name of family fun. I mean, any like ad busters, yes men, they do that before they've had their coffee in the morning. I mean, it's not like you can say like some of the stuff that Banksy does is interesting and feels a bit bleeding edge, the way the art is inserted into terrain or whatever. This is just so clumsily done, and I guess that's another point in the idea where we're shifting the focus onto Mr. Brainwash. It's the final, I guess, handshake that is trying to tell you that Banksy trusts Brainwash. But I mean, I think it's pretty unnecessary to the movie. I think it could have been cut out. It wouldn't have suspended my disbelief or enabled my disbelief or whatever the phrase is anymore, whether that scene was there or not. It just seemed like as clumsy as the photography ladder falling off bit, where that just feels, it broke the facade for me.
Well, I just think that it just is a subjective art element. I mean, to me, the scene, I agree, like the actual statement of what he did and the art itself is not great, but I think the scene is interesting, just like I said, that he covers for him and he doesn't break, and Banksy then says, "That's when I knew I could trust him." And there's a
suspenseful moment there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing, it's a more of a narrative thing, but I mean, it's like, I'm sure there are a lot of people that watch this film and hate it just because they don't like Banksy's art, and it's like, I don't think that's the way to watch this film. I mean, that's like watching, a documentary about whatever, the Dallas Cowboys, that this is this amazing film, and then just being like, this movie sucks because I hate the Cowboys, my team is the Raiders or whatever, like when Greg watched the Some Kind of Monster film, the Metallica film, and he couldn't get past the fact that they were making Metallica look bad, so he just turned off and was like, not interested or whatever. It's similar. I think, even though, you just have a problem with this specific scene, I think some people could write the film off completely just because they're like, that's not art. I don't like this. This is stupid. Click.
Reed probably wouldn't appreciate it.
Well, but the movie's fundamentally asking, what is art? And I mean, it's just like, watching some movie on capitalism and in the 1960s of capitalism getting out of hand. And then you look at where we are now and you go, boy, wasn't that quaint in the 1960s that this was their doomsday scenario. Is like, it's way worse. It can get just crazy. Much reality once we get there is far crazier. Watching science fiction films, what their future is and what the future ends up being and so forth. I find that some of the art statements in this movie just seem overly pat or overly quaint and just
well, so
really...
do a lot of the art in that show, but it doesn't mean that the sequence of the show holds no power just because the art in that show is just as one note or cliched or I mean, is the problem just because it's Banksy's art and he's
no. I guess the problem is, it's not even a problem. It's just that they look at the art in this movie. It's so clearly telling you what is bad art and what isn't. Like, the movie is not. The movie becomes quite authoritative, I think. Like, everyone just starts shitting on and the way the movie is framed. Theory is like a straw man that the movie builds up just to burn and just so that they can, and in a way it does validate the other working artists in this movie by taking him down. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but ultimately this, I don't know. Look at F for Fake and the fakery and the authenticity and what paintings are selling for and how those paintings are made and what goes into it in the 1975 era, and then now you look at all of it. It's stencils and spray paint and whatever. It's just interesting in how, like you said, a lot of the art world, the modern art world, has just gotten really wonky with cash.
But I don't think that they're completely oblivious to that in this.
They're highly aware.
Well, I mean, when you say there's a clear distinction between good art and bad art, I don't think there is. I mean, I think it's left to be up to you, but I think they are probably just as comfortable if there were people that decided that some of the pieces in Mr. Brainwash's show was good. I don't think all the people that came in that, talked to him and said, oh, that's interesting, I don't think they're painting those people as being idiots. I think to me, I got that they're just questioning everything. Yeah. I mean, including their own work.
But they're questioning it. They go about questioning it by all of the other street artists shitting on theory,
which is awesome. I mean, because you could say, and then the one guy says he doesn't know who the joke is on.
No, that's the line. The whole movie is in that particular line. He's like, I don't even know if there is a joke. Like, it's just saying the world is there, and this is the way things have panned out, and great artists get ignored, and bad artists get praised. I mean, why does Stephen King sell so many novels when some other smaller horror guy doesn't? A lot of this thing. There's a big scene in the movie, or a big voiceover by the Obama poster guy whose name I keep forgetting.
Shepard Fairey.
Where he says he created the Obey posters. They were a meaningless image, but he figured if he posted them enough, then they become legitimate because people have seen them in more than one place. Like, legitimacy, again, is generated by people talking about it, which I suppose in any, it's the same in F for Fake. Well, they value the art. It's people's opinions that legitimize things. But then once people start talking about it, then it steamrolls in, and now it's fully legitimate on its own. And so he's created meaning out of meaninglessness, not to fulfill anyone, just for the act of creating meaningfulness. It's almost like it's almost an abstract, like it's like one of those, you know, Schrodinger thought experiments. Like but in this case, it's done as performance art. And I guess what makes the street art documentary more compelling than maybe, you know, a cubist art documentary or whatever is that there's such a visual element to the art, because you got people scaling walls and you've got the cameras on night vision settings and you've got, you know, danger involved, as opposed to just some guy sweating in a cheap basement apartment trying to get his vision onto a canvas. Here you have people, you know, running around and doing things. I actually start to lose focus with the movie when it gets into the gallery world. I didn't mind the elephant, because the elephant now re-injects this element of danger, and then it starts to play into the animal rights and everything. But I guess the only element of danger in Thierry's show is illegitimizing the whole movement. That's the element of danger. And I guess as an act of making this movie, Banksy and company are flirting with the idea of illegitimizing their own
my
movement.
point, is that I don't think it's as simple as saying that, you know, they're putting themselves, or they're not holding themselves responsible for any of this bad art, and that they're putting it all onto Mr. Brainwash. I think that just by making this movie, they're bringing a critical eye to their own work, and then you know, the way it's presented in the film and where you end up with the film. And I don't think it's as clear cut that they're all aware of the film they made. Like, Banksy is aware of the film he made and how it reads and how they read. Like, if we sit here saying, oh, it feels like they're trying to separate themselves from that as being above it, they can't watch that and not think that. I mean, it's again, I think something that's by design. I think they're playing characters of themselves that are like, I regret ever letting him use my name. I don't believe that. I don't believe they regret that. I think that's a part of it. It's like, it's all self-critical, in my opinion. And I mean, right down to, you know, the elephant thing. I mean, which, you know, the elephant in the room, like, give me a break. And I think there's a shot of a Banksy dummy in a window, and it's spray painted as Banksy sold out, which I assume is a part of the piece. So they're very self-aware and probably self-critical of some of the directions that their art has gone. And I'm sure they don't like the idea of making art that's completely palatable to the world. I mean, I'm sure they are completely fine with criticizing their own work and maybe injecting a little bit of that criticism into the audience so that they look at some of their stuff with more of a cynical eye and wonder why is that art. And the explanation of why Obey is art, I think, plays into that. It's almost a joke. It's like, it's art because I just put a bunch of them up and you turned it into art, you know, and we're aware of that.
Well, and that's the act of art in itself. Art is art because people pay attention to it.
Yeah. So I didn't really get this. I got them separating themselves from it as a part of the story and a part of the arc of their characters in the film. Not so much that they truly wanted to be up here and Mr. Brainwash down here. I thought it was by design.
But I think that's why it's kind of, in a way, a risky movie to make, because, like James said, it's like you could walk away from this movie just thinking, well, what's the point of anyone's art, you know, and like, why is Banksy's any better than Mr. Brainwash or whatever? But of course, Banksy's Banksy, so he already has that kind of...
Well, and he's the guy who brought the question up now, so that's the art part of the art as well. He beat everyone
to the punch. Yeah. But, actually...
just look at that Simpsons opening he did, which is hypercritical of animation and how animation is made, but it itself is animation, and, you know, it's... I think he has that in his head, you know, this ability to be critical of his own work and his own profession, if you want to call that.
Well, and the ironic thing about his Simpsons opening was that much of it was criticized as all of that criticism being very old hat. That the Simpsons themselves had done that, but then it comes down to the thesis of Thierry's artwork is that, they say Warhol tried to repeat celebrity images until they became meaningless, but since he did it first, it took on its own meaning for the act of doing it. But Thierry's now made the act of making something meaningless. Like, it's like, and in F for Fake is when Clifford Irving writes goes to write the Hughes biography, and then ends up writing a book about the hoax of writing the book, and then the one filmmaker in the movie says, well, and eventually he'll write the book about writing the book about writing the book. And I just think that when you get self-critical, particularly of your own work, the danger or the fun, depending on your perspective, is falling into that endless. It's like pointing a video camera into the monitor that's watching it and just looking at the Doctor Who tunnel that it creates.
Yeah. I was just going to mention offhand that, like, you kind of said that you wanted more info on some of the actual street artists and stuff. I know there's the Beautiful Losers documentary that covers, like, I think 4 or 5 different artists, and Shepard Fairey is one of them. Might be worth checking out. It's a much more straightforward documentary, but it does talk a little bit about street art becoming commercialized and sold and all
and
that.
And it's a straight up. It's fascinating that this is the first. Well, I guess I don't know if you could do this with all the other movie club podcasts, but this particular podcast has more supplementary. Maybe it's a function of us doing documentaries, but each one of these films has 3 or 4 films that are almost supplemental.
Yeah.
And they're more straightforward films, like you're saying. It's a more straight up. But yeah, I guess I came off thinking that I didn't really like Exit Through the Gift Shop all that much, or I felt it to be extremely inferior. Maybe this conversation has convinced me a bit otherwise about the movie, but I'm kind of in the middle on how I feel about this movie. I feel it's almost too pat and too breezy, and it's funny, but it doesn't have that sort of inclusive. It's mean-spirited. And I think I get back to James. I think I don't ever find Orson Welles to be smug in F for Fake, whereas there is some layer of, like, holier than thou-ness in this movie that maybe rubbed me a bit the wrong way. I don't know how to verbalize it, but there's something there that itches a part of me that I don't like.
Okay. Any final thoughts on Exit Through the Gift Shop? Okay, I guess not. We'll move on, and we'll talk about our last film of the night, which is Catfish. And, this one also recently just came out on DVD, but it's clearly, as everyone knows, we're going to get into spoilers, but this is one, you definitely want to watch before hearing what happens, I think. Directed by Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman. And, of course, it sort of follows a internet relationship that starts out kind of innocently and becomes something more. And, it's shot almost at times like a thriller. It's got a definite mystery that unravels as you watch it. And I guess, like, one thing that I wanted to mention too, with Exit Through the Gift Shop, I guess we've been talking about a lot of these movies, and it doesn't matter if it's real or fake. And I think Exit Through the Gift Shop's an interesting one because I think most people, even if they thought it was real and they find out it's fake or suspect that it's fake, that doesn't really change their opinion too much of the movie. They're still like, you know what, that's cool and clever. But with Catfish, this has definitely turned into an issue where it's like people start pointing out, like, well, how could this have happened, and didn't they know this ahead of time? And, like, people start picking out flaws in this movie and saying that it's fake, and as soon as they do that, it falls apart for them and they think it's worthless. Personally, I still think it's a pretty awesome movie, and having watched Tall Hot Blonde, which is another peripheral movie, very similar story, but the treatment of it is not at all as compelling as Catfish. The story is compelling, but the actual presentation is not at all as compelling as Catfish, in my opinion. What were your thoughts on Catfish, Kurt?
Okay. the act of watching Catfish the first time is pretty spellbinding stuff. I think Catfish works immensely because you are everything. There's a heightened sense of being in the moment that works in Catfish. Now, I did watch it again for this podcast, and it still played pretty good, but it didn't quite play the same way, and I don't think the movie has the density of the other two films to hold up to multiple viewings. But I knew nothing about the movie going in, and I saw it at a film festival. I even talked with one of the directors after I saw the movie briefly, and again, I'm sure a conversation he's had with many people on the nature of reality and truth in thing. Of course, they were very adamant at the Q&A that everything was on the up and up, and that they're, the self-deprecating, and I guess in a way you could say it's false modesty or not, I don't know, that they said, we're not smart enough to make a elaborately schemed film. But you got to give this movie credit for creating enough interest in something that people thought they already knew, but putting a spin on it to make it feel new. Like, I don't think it's news to anyone that people aren't who they say they are on the internet. Like, that's nothing new, but they've told the tale. They've given it an internet aesthetic. I mean, it ain't quite Scott Pilgrim with its aesthetics, but especially at the beginning of this movie, there's a huge chunk like with the Universal logo and the telling things with Google Earth and TomTom navigate. I really did like that element. I wish actually there was more. Too often this movie feels like it was shot on, point and shoot cameras that take video, which I think a lot of it was. It's a ratty looking movie, but I did like the way they handled. Like, they took far too long, I think, to get to the woman, the reveal, and thankfully they do spend a fair bit of time on the reveal, and I liked all of that. So, in the end, I'm actually somewhat ambivalent about the movie overall. The first time watching, it really had me, but it's not a movie that. There's things I appreciate it, but it's not a movie that overly. I would like if I had to rank these three, a Catfish should be at the bottom.
Okay, Jay.
Well, I'll throw it to James and Marina, and I feel like I've been hogging. They've been quiet. James.
Go for it.
James.
I'm still here. Yeah.
You guys can go first.
For me, this is my favorite of the three. I guess, enjoyed this from the first moment to the last moment. What I liked about it, especially what made me fall in love with it, is when there's the final confrontation when they're at the horse farm, and Neve kind of, he gives, was her name Angela, a chance to kind of to come clean and to explain herself. And I just felt like the two of them were on a more level playing field. I don't think that Angela is necessarily like mentally ill. I just think she was in a really rough place when she was doing this stuff, and I don't feel like they exploited her. I just feel like the speed with which this technology is moving and the communication is changing is so quickly, so far outstripping our psychology that people's reaction to it, and people on the periphery, like Angela, the reaction to it, you almost feel like, are we in a position to judge yet? And I don't necessarily feel like Neve and his friends were comfortable very harshly judging her, because was this whole thing they were engaging in entirely genuine? I mean, does a person who felt the way Neve supposedly felt about Megan for 8 months come to terms with it so quickly? I mean, and it betrayed the possibility that the whole relationship, the whole dynamic they had existed in a kind of weird vacuum.
A media vacuum.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't make any sense. I don't know.
Well, that's the last time I throw to James. That makes sense.
No, insofar that it gets back to you point a camera at someone. Well, Facebook is a form of camera. You have a certain amount of creative control. You edit what gets shown and what doesn't get shown, and people behave accordingly. So this is like the first movie to use Facebook like a camera, because David Fincher's Facebook movie is a totally different movie. I think this is one that's really about Facebook,
The real Facebook movie, yeah.
Right.
So,
I don't know. It's such a terribly mannered way of communicating, and it's just like suffocating at times. I don't know. Not to like work this into a plug for my other podcast, but Matt and I have gone around in circles so much about my sort of love-hate relationship with Facebook and how it all makes me sort of paranoid and everything. And this is a perfect example of why it's just these shenanigans. Some people are just up to no good out there, I mean, it's an interesting thing. Your brain is kind of like chasing its own tail, and it gets sloshed around in the process. So you don't really have a real reliable means of auditing it.
Well, but I'll give it this. It's better than The Net and Untraceable, two other films about technology that are completely clueless. Like, in a way, this feels fairly savvy about how you can use technology.
It's no Ghost in the Machine, though.
But have you seen The Net 2.0?
There's a direct-to-DVD sequel of The Net. This doesn't surprise me.
That's actually a really good title.
Oh, God. Earlier, you guys were talking about if we should judge documentaries the way or if we should review documentaries the way we review films. And I sort of do, and that's one of the reasons I really didn't care for this film. I saw it, I think it was opening weekend in Vancouver. It was insane. Buying a ticket was impossible. We literally snuck in. I mean, you would think it was the biggest event of the movie year. And it was kind of interesting to see it with a full house where you could sort of react to how people were reacting to what was going on screen. I was bored. I wasn't interested. I didn't like these characters. I didn't care for the story. I kept thinking, this is stupid. Who would really do this? And I mean, when you get the big reveal, I was just kind of like, seriously? This is what I sat here waiting for? This is your big reveal? I mean, first I thought they were going for, I don't even know what I think they were going for. I really thought they were going for some pedophile angle, which really started rubbing me the wrong way. And then when they finally give you the real story, or whatever if it is the real story, I was just kind of like, really? Seriously? And I just lost interest. I didn't care to discuss it with anybody. I didn't really want to talk about this movie. I didn't want to read about this movie. The whole thing just seemed like so overblown. And I kind of understand this. I think Kurt nailed it when he says this is like the real Facebook movie, because it is. It kind of, it's the real story of what could happen to people, or, what did really happen to somebody that used this technology, I don't even know if it's inappropriately, or I don't even know. I don't really care, to be honest. This movie does nothing for me. I don't understand the hype. I just don't get it.
Well, if you were to analyze a movie based on its executive producers, probably something you should never do. But I think in this movie, it's kind of a certain level of awesomeness, and that the two key executive producers that have nothing to do with the movie, they just came on board to help sell it. But the two executive producers are Eugene Jarecki, the director of
Andrew Jarecki. There's two.
Why do I confuse? It's the director.
Is a different.
Sorry, Andrew Jarecki is the one who did Capturing the Freedmans, right?
Yeah.
So it's the director of Capturing the Freedmans and Brett Ratner. Like, is that not like perfect in every way to sum up this movie? What did Eugene Jarecki do?
Is that the guy who did Why We Fight?
Oh,
Yeah, he did something recently. Didn't he do Inside Job?
Oh yeah, I think he did.
jeez, that's confusing.
So, okay, so Jay, you haven't given, well, you have given your thoughts a few times, but
Well, I rewatched it for the Movie Club podcast.
right.
And it's just a movie that, you really is it Eugene Jarecki?
No, Charles Ferguson did Inside Job. Why am
Anyways, it's a movie that, in the theater, it was captivating. It was suspenseful. It was Freakonomics, right?
That's the one.
Yeah. And it did have me on the edge of my seat, and I did feel uncomfortable for the moments where you were supposed to feel uncomfortable. And then, of course, afterwards, there was all of this thought of, knowing that there's a controversy that, people thought that it was fake, or elements of it were fake, and thinking about that after the fact. And I will say it is one movie that I just really could not pinpoint how I felt about it. Even rewatching it now, I was, going to post on Twitter that I rewatched it, and trying to think of what I would give this movie out of 4 is a tough thing. Not that it really matters, but because it does work. It does work as a piece of investigative sort of mystery making, sensational cinema. But I think it does fall apart in certain areas as well. I think that the overall message of the film is kind of muddy, and it tries to grasp it, to hang on to this whole Facebook Web 2.0, is that what you call it?
Social network.
The modern way of communicating idea. But I think that is a very shallow overall theme. I think it's just an excuse to show this sensational story that probably has just as much of a spot on, I keep bringing it up, Dateline NBC. It's that kind of story. And the thing that separates this is it's the way it's told. It's told...
Well, that's the thing. Tall, Hot Blonde feels like a Dateline NBC thing. This is something different. I mean, there's moments where it's...
Well, it's using horror film narrative.
Right. And
the trailer, in the end, I never saw the trailer until after I saw the movie, but the trailer completely sells the movie like a horror movie. And I don't know if your disappointment, Marina, was factored into the web Sundance, or I don't know, the hype based around it.
That's the thing, though. All I knew was there was this movie, has something to do with Facebook. I never saw a trailer.
Okay.
I mean, I never...
So it wasn't that you were sold wrong, because I talked to several people that complained that they wanted a Saw movie because the movie sort of was set up to be like a Saw movie.
See, I don't get that. I get it, but I don't agree with it. But I do think that it's a matter of, the whole idea of reality and fiction comes into this. Does it matter if something's not real? And I do think, I think the thing is real. I think Angela is real. I think all of that is real. There's just the idea of willful blindness, where there's a point in the film where I imagine they must have, said, I think we've got something here, and then went with it. And whether or not that matters. I mean, at first I was thinking to myself that did matter, and maybe it doesn't matter so much, but I think the ability to step back and say these guys are douchebags, without then including the entire film is a tough thing, because it's their film. You take Tall Hot Blonde, spoiler, it's a similar story, but it involves actual murder. And what if that film was actually made by someone who was somehow not the murderer, but somehow responsible for the murder? You would then judge that film. It would be tough to sit through that film no matter
that
how
the
good it is.
filmmakers created the problem.
But the weird thing is, the movie is kind of, in a weird way, told by someone who is involved, which I found very strange.
Well, that was
off-putting.
just, I think, a really poor choice, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But still, the idea with Catfish, I think I've figured out the problem for me is that the film is made by the guys who did this.
And you don't like the guys, so the fact that they made it and are
it's not as simple as just like, these guys are assholes, I'm not going to like their film. Their film was good, but any sort of ethical thing, that problem with the film comes from the fact that the film exists because it was made by these guys. Like, if it was a third-party filmmaker who came in and followed this story,
so it might film about these guys making a film,
and then you don't judge the film. Like, you don't sit there caught up in these thoughts of like, okay, well, I wonder how they're benefiting from this, and I wonder how Angela and her family isn't, and I wonder how the husband felt about this, and when I'm watching them waiting outside the house and talking about how they're going to approach this, I wouldn't be judging them as harshly, or judging the film as harshly as I would be just them.
Right.
And it's not as I don't think it's easy to say they're complete assholes, because it's again, because they're the ones making the film, there's an enticement there that, they're documentary filmmakers, they're looking for a subject, and the problem is you can start thinking the reason they're doing this is because they see a film in it. Whereas if there was a third party just following this as it's naturally happening, yes, there's still a film in it, but it's not as easy to just completely judge the film and the filmmakers on one page, I think. And watching it again, like, they're young and they're caught up in it, and yes, it could be very easy to just get caught up in it, not being completely aware of how it will affect the person. But there are some scenes in this movie that I think are just brutal. Like, even watching it again, the scene where she's painting him and he asks her to talk like Megan, to me is just brutal. Like, it's uncomfortable, and it's to me tasteless. And watching it again, seeing.
You mean that you interpret that scene as bringing out the freak show?
Yes.
See, I do not get that out of that scene at all. I've heard that scene being talked about, and that people interpret Nev or Neve or whatever his name is, body language, as going, holy shit, we're getting great stuff here. I didn't see that at all. I saw that as real. Like, I actually think that that's one of the more honest moments in the movie.
I don't get that at all. I think it's just, completely, not that he's sitting there like excited, but just completely aware that we're here to finish this. We're here, like, even when they're at the door and the brother is saying, stay strong, stay strong, stay strong. He's not saying that in a, keep it together emotionally. I know this is tough for you. He's saying it in
we got to get the footage.
We've got to get in there. We've got to document this. It's all, for the film, which, I don't know that I don't know entirely where I stand there.
And then I question what ended up on the cutting room floor and what made it in the movie, because there's about 3 or 4 points in the film where they debate continuing. Like, obviously, they continue because you're watching the film, but they, those scenes are intentionally included because the filmmakers are aware that certain audience members are going to be. So in a way, it's like owning the question and not having it thrown at the film as criticism. But obviously they don't own it well enough, because a lot of people still throw it as criticism. But no, I don't know, maybe Marina and James should comment on that particular, because I think that's one of the key scenes in the entire, it's a linchpin to a degree of the whole, like, narrative part of the film. How did you guys feel about that particular scene?
Well, I'll jump in just because Marina said she didn't want to talk about it. So I guess I'll go first. But I actually found that scene kind of touching. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the guys are douchebags. But I mean, they're like it's like, you can't, it's like that whole thing with, like, the scorpion on the turtle's back or whatever, and he shocks him with his tail and stuff. I mean, yeah, they're douchebags. I mean, this is like their whole deal. And I just think that, yeah, she was kind of lovably off kilter, but I guess the sadness I saw in Neve was like, it's sort of like his whole, like, I'm not 100% convinced that this wasn't entirely not a fantasy of his. I mean, yeah, I don't care how big of a douchebag a guy is, right? But this, like, beautiful girl is like singing songs to him, and they're texting romantic notes back and forth. I mean, you've got to at some point question whether this is true or not. And I mean, I don't mean to be graphic, right? But in that scene where he's lying in bed and he's telling reading the text messages they sent back and forth, what he was doing was, masturbating, not in the bed at that moment where the scene was taking place, but whenever whether or not he was actually gratifying himself when he wrote these text messages back and forth, I guess we'll never know. but
what we can assume
was essentially he was masturbating, and that's how this technology is like supposedly bringing us closer together. No, it's making us more isolated, and we're kind of in our own little worlds, and
and that underscores the awkwardness of their actual confrontation. Like you mentioned before, that where they're at the horse farm, it's in long shot, I think, but you can sense the social awkwardness in real life versus the somewhat in control technology layer removed, less awkwardness in Facebook life. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
But what about that scene is touching? Like, do you think his request to have Angela speak like Megan again is because he wanted to jerk off once more? I mean, it was because he wanted her to fess up, and he wanted her to. It's almost like it's payback time. It's like you told me you were someone that you're not. I want to hear that voice. Show me that voice. Like, expose yourself. And it's not as blunt as that, but I mean, to me, that's what I got from the scene. It was, he felt a resentment towards her for it. If it's real or not, I don't know. But, that it was all a confrontation. It was like, we're going to show up, we're going to bombard this person, and we're going to make her fess up. Even if, what does it actually mean? Like, what does her fessing up mean?
I actually got the sense that Neve was being hurt in that scene. Like, what? I did. I got the sense that he,
fuck him. Like,
no. But I mean,
he knew way ahead of time that it wasn't what it was.
Absolutely, absolutely. But to me, it's an interesting visual moment, and whether or not you say there's like the wrong ethic, moral, blah 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 reasons for doing it. I'm not going to deny that there's emotion on both sides for that, staged or not. And I mean, if it takes that, sometimes you get the right response for the wrong reasons. And I think that scene it's murky.
I feel the main issue for me is that the emotion on her end is 100% genuine, 100% painful. And, you look at what's around her, and the emotion on Neve's end, even if there is some there, it's going to be okay, Neve. You're going to go back to your office in New York City, and you're going to find another girl in 10 seconds to bang. I mean,
yeah, I agree with you, Jay. That scene did ring a little bit false to me. I think the thing is with Neve, like, I felt like in parts of the movie he was acting, and that kind of bugged me a bit. But the one scene that he really sold me on, which happened earlier, which we were already talking about, is the horse farm scene, when he knows he has to, for the movie to continue, he has to confront her about it. And he does it in a way that I found it like he was like sensitive enough to her, and managed to get her to talk about it in a way that was acceptable. It was very awkward and uncomfortable to watch, but it was also suspenseful and it worked for the movie. And that scene worked for me.
It could have ended there. It could have been like, because she fesses up there.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I know. And the look on her face alone is, okay, he knows. I know that he knows. She knows that I know. Done. Instead, it's like, all right, now get into this chair, draw me, and talk like her.
but there's another element to that scene, or to the subsequent scenes as they're hanging out at the house, which is that she does have feelings for Neve, and like if she wanted them to leave, I think her reaction would have been a little different. Like I think she would have definitely been like, "Get the hell out of my house!" Like she wanted them around. She wanted him around.
You know why? Because she's desperate and she's crazy. She's schizophrenic. She, like, rewatching this movie and listening to her talking on the phone to him, making up lies that are just like the weirdest sort of like peripheral lies. Like, I can't remember the exact example, but she's talking on the phone about like things that are happening off the conversation that she's clearly making up, and like all these people on Facebook, different identities. Oh, the thing of the brother saying like, accusing Neve of not appreciating the song that was sent to him, like multiple personalities disorder. I mean, maybe, you know, it's fine. It's Facebook. She's creating a fantasy world, but the reason she wants him to stay is because she's completely desperate and miserable and crazy. And he stays, and he decides, I'm going to stay, and I'm going to make her talk about how she hurt me, and I'm going to make the audience sympathize with me. It's like, you're kidding me. You want me to sympathize with you? The guy who lives in New York City is young and attractive and he's a budding photographer. I mean,
but I think
to me, it seems it's odd to me. Like it's trying to build sympathy and a connection between these two people that have zero connection. That connection is gone. It was never there. It's fake. It's, at this point, it's a show, and it's only a show for him. It's not for her. She's completely caught up in it. It's completely genuine, and they're the ones that are in her house filming someone really feeling the things she's feeling. And they've already come to terms with this a long time ago. So
I disagree. I still think that I don't know about the two guys with actual director credits, but the main guy who, you know, he's the spotlight of the film, but it's also him, you know, that went through this weird relationship and you know, yeah, okay, so they came to terms with it on paper. But on paper versus being right there, I still think that there was closure for him in those scenes. I agree that they have more control of the situation, and there's more of a self-awareness on their part. But they're filmmakers. But I don't think it's valid to say that. Okay, yeah, you should feel more for Angela. I agree, 100%. But I'm not saying that it's a 100-0 situation.
I think the moment that you feel for Neve is the moment where they're playing the songs back and he says, I feel like an idiot. I feel like I've been duped. There, yeah. I felt for him. But then that was it.
Then you felt that it was like, from there on in, it was revenge. It's revenge.
And he even gets to a point where he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, and his brother's like, well, you know, you're the one who signed up for this. I didn't sign up for this. You're directing me. He's like, well, you're in the film. But then it gets to
all before. Okay, but it
gets to a point where suddenly Neve has this change of heart, and he's like, let's do this. Let's go find them. Let's get them. Let's, you know, figure out who's behind this. And
he's belting the buckle and putting the camo paint on and locking in grenades.
They might as well have had a scene of that.
I mean, that's montage.
That's not to say that what happens is completely worthless, and it wasn't interesting or didn't trigger emotion in me or whatever. But that scene in particular, I think, could have. I think without that scene, they could have alleviated a lot of the criticism that was hurled towards them. And if it were a third party filmmaker that was just following it, then it would just be like, these guys are, wow, I can't believe these guys went there. And I'm sure the filmmaker making that film would have heightened that douchebaggery in their version of the movie.
Well, two other scenes I wanted to draw attention to. One of them's in the film, and one of them isn't in the film, but is on the extras. So the one that's in the film is Angela's husband. Like when the filmmakers brutally explain the movie, and I hate that scene. It's where they get the title, where he's talking about.
I thought
sometime
that scene was awesome.
Your other scene is in there. Him as a person, I find it fine, but going back to the judging a documentary by its filmmaking technique, that might as well be the scene in $1 Million Baby when Hilary Swank talks about having the courage and the will to put her dog down. So, like, I mean, that's, you know.
Well, I mean,
I found the actual. I mean, whether it's real, whether it's true, whether this guy said that speech or
I believe 100% he said it.
But I don't know. I just find it sort of. It seems the movie condescending. It's condescending to me.
It seems cheesy if you think that the title existed previous to this conversation.
Of course,
but I mean the title was pulled from that conversation.
I know, and maybe I don't know. Maybe
to me it just seems like it is a no-brainer. I mean,
yeah, that guy just happened to come up with something kind of poetic, and they pulled something out of it and said, "Let's."
I certainly wouldn't look at that and be like, okay, fuck this.
It's not
cheesy.
It's not a deal breaker, but I don't know. I'm always a little ill when it's like I can be on board with Chasing Amy until Kevin Smith comes in and actually explains Chasing Amy to me, and I felt that scene, even though, like you said, it's kind of a chicken and egg in how the title comes about, but I don't know that scene's sad.
That's one thing that I will give more of a pass to in documentaries than I will fiction, is that sometimes when something like that just works out so perfectly, it's above writing. It just, if that was written, if this was a scripted film, then yes, that would seem cheesy. But because it's real, and because, you know, it just worked that guy happened to tell that story and it fits so perfectly, it's just above. It can't be touched for being cliched or cheesy or obvious or clumsy to me. It just feels like it's simpatico. Is that the right word? Like it's just you know, it just works so perfectly. Yeah. It pulls it all together, and I would, you know, I guess I give it a pass for that. And I have in other movies, like, you know, there's a lot of scenes in other documentaries where it's like, if this Anvil, you know, if that movie was written, it would just be a standard 3-act comedy that has some funny moments. But because they managed to take a documentary film and structure it as something that plays like Spinal Tap or whatever, it's elevated a little bit. Otherwise, it would just be like, oh, this is like Spinal Tap, but not as funny.
Sean, like that scene,
I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, I felt bad for that guy too, but I
felt the worst for that guy.
He was the most oblivious. Like, there's the one thing about Catfish is that you can actually parse the level of how much information each character has, and that he's at the bottom. Yeah. Him and Abby are at the bottom of the list.
Yeah,
and he's so sincere, and like when they're asking him like, who do you think we are or whatever, he's like, oh, you're one of her best customers and blah blah blah, and it's like, I don't know, to me that just as well is like a target on Angela. It just seems like, oh, look what she's doing to her husband, she's lying behind his back, and it's like, it's a little more complex than that, I think. Like she may have been playing around with this poor attractive 24-year-old New York City filmmaker's feelings, but she certainly didn't expect him to show up at her door with cameras and some flowers ready to, you know, like Chris Hansen from Dateline NBC to Catch a Predator. But as I've said before, it makes for some pretty captivating filmmaking. I mean,
So what's the other scene? I'm curious about
Okay.
the deleted scene.
The other scene is so the woman.
And this shows their style of getting what they want to get.
So you know what I'm going to say before I say it. The woman that is used as the face of Angela, the woman Megan, that he cuts out and puts in the other picture, and there's all these pictures of her like with a guitar and drinking and all that. Well, she's a fashion photographer and model and a multi-purposed artist that lives in some big American city.
Let me interrupt 1 second. If there was ever a scene that I felt was guilty of being completely clumsy and like heavy-handed, and it's the scene of him being cut out and put beside her,
put in beside
because
her.
it's clearly done after the fact, and it's clearly done as a visual summary of how they're feeling. That's the one I could do without.
Well, I like that. I like that because I liked all of the elements of Catfish that used regular, mundane internet screens as a film-telling aesthetic. I felt
so did I, except that one, because that feels like something a 12-year-old would do.
So anyway, back to the other scene. It's on the extras on the disc.
I don't know if it is. I saw
it's
it
on the web, or it's on 2020, the 2020 show. But they got in contact with this woman because they wanted to bring her into the documentary because she's also been one of the used, and she would be even further down than the guy that gives the Catfish story on the oblivious level, because she has no interaction with anything. Her image has been appropriated and she's completely unaware of it. So they contact her and they want her reaction to being told that her identity has been stolen as a masturbatory aid for Angela to offer Neve, but they don't tell her. Like, they say they're doing a documentary on fashion photography, and could they meet to have a pre-filming discussion? So she comes with her boyfriend, flies down or wherever. I don't know how far apart they were.
To New York,
Vancouver. And then they just sort of, boom, spring it on her. And that, when I saw that scene, like, I was actually more on board with the Catfish side of things. But when I saw that scene, I mean, that's sort of a character revealing scene of the filmmakers, just that they did it that way.
Yeah.
Like, that they, again, like Jay's problem, which is not hugely my problem with the film, but I can see why you have this issue with the movie, because now they're elevating the film over real people's emotions. Like, it's a movie about playing with your emotions, and yet the filmmakers are doing far more fucking around with people than what's going on within the film, which actually makes this dovetail awesome with F for Fake and the Banksy film. Even though it's not about art, it starts out about the Abbey's art and photography and whatever, but really it has that element of really messing disingenuously with people's emotion. And I think all three of these films do that to a degree. But I again, to use James's word, smug, I guess Catfish comes across as the most smug. And it's kind of an oblivious frat boy kind of smug way, not the, I think the Banksy one's a more high art kind of, we know best smug. This is a different kind of thing. But that scene, if there's ever a deal breaker for anyone watching Catfish, you could point to that scene. It didn't completely break, because I will have to acknowledge that when you're watching Catfish, it's marvelously effective. I obviously
agree.
Marina's in disagreement here, but I mean, when I was watching it, and I'm pretty cynical when it comes to films, and I was certainly on board with Catfish as I was watching it the first time.
It just makes you wonder why they wouldn't be up front with at least some of the details to do that interview. Like, I guess you could say they wanted like a live reaction of how she will, but even that, it's like, again, what is this, Dateline NBC? I mean, you want to have her holding the little DVD player and be like, oh my God.
Yeah. Like,
I mean,
how
cares?
cinematic is that reaction? That's, to me, a lack of faith by the filmmakers in what they could get, and they're just going for the cheap TV gimmick.
It's that, and it's that they might have been concerned she might not have wanted to take part if she knew that it was
probably
well, and then
something
that's double douchebag.
Yeah, especially if she signed something ahead of time that was like for
we've got
what
your
she thought.
signature.
Yeah.
But you wonder where that's going to stand legally. I don't know.
Maybe that's why it's not in the film.
James or Marina, I don't know if you saw that scene or have any comment on that scene.
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either. I think if I had seen it, I might have been more critical of them, but because it doesn't sound like it portrays them very kindly.
Yeah, I'm curious if it actually is an extra on the DVD, because that would seem like something you wouldn't want to put on there. But
there's a Q&A on the DVD. I think that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's. I rented it from Blockbuster, and that's the only thing on there was that sort of lame interview, and I turned it off after like 2 minutes because it was annoying. But there was nothing really to be learned from that.
And that it really is a real shame. I mean, if there's one thing that all documentaries should have, real or hoaxed or anywhere in between, documentaries should be loaded to the gills with special features. Because, what's the first thing? Well, the first thing I do, especially if I'm at home watching a documentary, although you can do it mobilely now with all these devices, but I usually end up going to Wikipedia or some other site because I want to know more. A good documentary said, even if it's a technique documentary, the subject makes me want to know more. I'm certainly going up and looking at Banksy art after I watch this. I'm curious about Clifford Irving and even Howard Hughes after watching F for Fake, and I'm curious about this. It's kind of a major dropping of the ball that they just went with a bare bones disc.
I mean, it's clear that they're afraid of, they know that there's a lot of people who are critical of them out there. They seem very defensive at this point about the movie, like whenever people interview them and stuff, which is, again, just makes it seem more suspicious. But
I'm curious, James, does your opinion change at all knowing that Angela is schizophrenic?
What? How do you know that she is, or what's the deal?
Yeah, it was on the same 2020 episode. They did an episode that was kind of a follow-up of Catfish, and it featured the interview with the girl who played Megan, but they actually interview Angela, and they reveal that she's schizophrenic.
Well, yeah. That changes my opinion. I mean, I guess the impression I was under is that to me, she struck me as like an intelligent, creative, and sensitive woman who's trapped in this like sort of mundane life, but more than that, this kind of house of horrors with these. I mean, I don't want to be insensitive, but these like retarded kids who are like moaning and screaming and have to have their diapers changed. It's like a nightmare. I mean, anybody would go nuts with that. And I guess I didn't know that she was actually schizophrenic. That kind of gives me pause to reassess things.
It's interesting that in the end title cards, they put up all of these facts like Angela doesn't have cancer, Megan isn't at Dawn Hill or Dawn Tree or whatever. Why not put, and Angela is schizophrenic? Like,
yeah.
Did they know at the time, though?
Well, they must. I mean, the first thing you would think is she's schizophrenic.
Yeah, I got that without the text. I think that's so clearly in the subtext. Like, I didn't look at this woman as lonely and looking for something to do and finding a casually borderline creative outlet. I mean, you've got to be a lot further along to do what she did to the level that she did it. I mean,
see, I don't know about that, because like I feel like, I mean, maybe part of it is how they set up the movie to play that way, and maybe that's why they would leave something like that out, because they want it to feel like you can identify with her. There's people out there in tough situations who might retreat to the internet as an escape and do something kind of like what she did. Like I don't know. I never really thought that she would. I didn't think of her as clinically schizophrenic. I just thought of her as, like a lot of people have, sort of different personas based on, you know, their interactions online and stuff. It didn't seem like an actual illness to me.
Well, I remember the scene now on the phone where I thought, watching it again, that it's like, wow, it's when she's being Megan, so she's already, you know, being someone else.
Right.
She's talking to Neve, and the story is that her horse is in labor or something. And she's like saying how tired she is because her horse is currently in labor, and she's going through this whole ordeal of this horse giving birth. And it's like, that seems like a pretty far, like, just being Megan is a lie enough. And then to like add on that she's going through this horse labor ordeal at this barn that, you know, she didn't own, with these horses that she didn't own. And it seems like a far distance to go for a normal person that's already on the phone with someone that they're lying to. Like, just information she doesn't even have to give. Like, she's creating things just to enhance the character or something.
But I think that's what happens when you start, you know, lying and building false stories, is it just builds
to a degree. But I think that she's much further along the line. Like, I certainly got that when I watched the film. And I mean, and that adds to the fact that, like, one of the criticisms of people that like to crap on where the 1 hour mark is in Catfish, where it became fake documentary from a real documentary, because I think all three of these have that 1 hour mark wherever it happens to be in the movie, is one of the criticisms is, why were these three young, super savvy, net, electronic, filming everything all the time, you know, social networking age, so easily duped by this? And I think they were so easily duped by the level at which it's harder to swallow the small lies, but it's easier to swallow the ginormous lies. And the way she has done this, and I mean, there's a scene in the movie where he says, you know, it's not that I felt that she tricked me. It was the fact that I just had no reason at that point to look anything up. I mean,
but people seem to just hold Neve responsible for that.
Oh, no,
and forget that there are two other people involved that also could be looking stuff up. Of course. And, you know, whether or not Neve is willfully blind in this scenario, it doesn't just have to be him. Like, the two filmmakers could be just as willfully blind as well. And then the question of, you know, in terms of Googling these things, you know, like, did they Google it on screen or did they Google it off screen? And then I think they've actually said that they on screen. They've said they redid it on screen, right? Like the sense that, like, you find it where the timeline is. It's an 8-month timeline, but the timeline is very poorly articulated in the film. Like, it could be 4 weeks. You know, I mean, I only knew it was 8 months because they said it was 8 months. Other than the fact that you're sending a few large postal packages through the mail, there's not a lot to really give you a sense of timeline. The other thing I think that shows Angela's sort of mental state is that she has no problem pulling these pieces of music and passing them off as her own with no fear that, you know, someone could easily Google them. Like the Truman Sleeps piece, the Philip Glass piece, when you see it on their screen as they're listening to it, it's actually, she didn't even retitle it. It's called Truman Sleeps. And it's like, only someone that must, I think, someone that must have some sort of disconnect there would actually send this stuff and think that they're not going to find out. Well, there where I think you're dead wrong. I mean, the people are stupid. I mean, I think you're giving, like, a lot of people are not technical savvy, and while Angela is technical savvy enough to have multiple cell phones and do it, there's still a line of where you. But she even says in the movie that she kind of thought he had figured it out, and that she almost wanted to get caught. This idea comes up that she wanted to get caught, which to me seems like she's someone that's trapped in a cycle that wants to get out of it, right? And like, by sending these pieces of music so haphazardly and lazily, it's almost like she just wants to get out of a cycle that she's in because of some mental condition, rather than actually, you know, being completely aware of what she's doing or choosing to do it because, you know, she's bored or whatever. It's like an impulse.
Well, to pull this all the way around to the real documentary versus fictional film and wherein lies, and, you know, the artistic debate on that is up in the air and maybe completely unnecessary, but there's an interesting business side to whether it's a documentary or a fictional film, because one interesting story that I read on the web about Catfish is some of the music they used in the film. There's one song that they use in the film that if they're a documentary, it classifies as fair use because that's what reality was as they were capturing it. But if they're a fictional film, they have to pay for the rights. And I don't know what the song is. I've done the research badly here.
I heard about it, and I guess they are getting sued because they suspect that it's not completely a documentary.
And not only that, I mean, the filmmakers made, and I guess this falls on Andrew/Eugene Jarecki or even Brett Ratner's error in the movie, in that they used that song as the closing credits as well. So it's not just used as a piece of you know, music that happens to be hinging on the reality of the situation, like as in she sent it, when of course she's violating copyright to lie, but whatever. But anyways, so there's a thought there that this record label suing this documentary film, a lot of the realities will come in when people have to be under oath, which is a fascinating side story and totally functions in with the Clifford Irving F for Fake. Like, it's amazing how these three films swirl together. And I don't know, I'll be very curious. I can still recommend Catfish to people, and I still like the movie, and I think it's an interesting movie, even if it makes you feel a bit icky, you know, in your soft, juicy moral center. But
my moral center is too juicy.
But you know, it's still I still think that right or wrong, it's an interesting film to recommend to people, and I think it's a film that net savvy or non-net savvy people could have a conversation. Obviously, people from Vancouver accepted.
Well, I just wanted to bring up, like, I think, you know, a lot of this does come down to if you think the movie is exploitative and if you think it's immoral or not. And I would just say, for me personally, like, there's a lot of like, should you be expected to watch the movie and then go out and research all this other stuff around it to find out the truth so that you can judge this movie? Because to me, watching the movie, it doesn't feel immoral. The characters in it, yeah, it pushes the boundaries, but I still feel like they're respectful enough of the people that, you know, Angela and her family, that it doesn't cross the line for me. But I agree, when you start hearing about all the other stuff and thinking about the possibilities of what may have or may not have happened, then you start questioning that. And it's like, well, okay, I just want to cut it off and be like, okay, the movie itself works for me. It doesn't cross the line. End of story. But I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not acceptable. Maybe that's not the right answer. I know Malcolm... whatever his name, Ingram, has been ranting on Twitter nonstop about how much he hates Catfish and he thinks it's like the scourge of the documentary world because it's so exploitative. And I don't agree with that.
There's more. I mean, that Wiseman documentary, Titicut Follies, feels dangerously in exploitive territory. I mean, there's some
I actually
scenes
don't
in that
agree
film
with
that feel like really sensationalized. You know, I mean, there's any element of telling a story that things are going to be magnified, even if it's accidentally. So it all comes down to parsing filmmaker intentions, and that's a very dangerous game to get into. I mean, you're going to be wrong on some level. It's fun to talk about, but
right. I mean, if you want to talk about the moral. The spot where, you know, if your moral compass is pointing perfectly north, the spot where you are judged is when you continue to film after you see who Angela is and what her kids are like and blah blah blah. And that's not to say that, you know, it's kind of like saying, you know, if I was, you know, if I witnessed someone stealing an old lady's purse, would you intervene? And if you know, or would you pull your camera out and film it? Or there's a This American Life episode about the guy who films the woman who's standing on the shore with this big storm coming in, and he's dealing with the fact that he stood there and took pictures rather than going to help her, and she ended up being washed away. And I mean, not everyone is perfect, and these guys, you know, to say these guys are douchebags, it's not like a all-encompassing, like, in perpetuity statement. Like, they just, in this film, I think, made choices that were kind of douchebaggy. It doesn't mean that they're you know, like that all the time. Like, everyone makes poor choices, and this one, it just so happens that they made a poor choice because it was so tantalizing, the story, the idea that this could make such a great film. And, you know, they ended up getting a deal with Universal Pictures and the whole shebang, and now they're the talk of the town because they decided, rather than turn the camera off, they're going to keep it on. And it's like, some people are willing to do that, some people aren't.
Society almost always rewards those people that are going to do the wrong thing. There's a fascination with watching people do the wrong thing on screen. I mean, all of reality television is fundamentally based on watching the people do the wrong thing on screen.
I've always felt that with documentaries, if I can generally, like, or Errol Morris has been accused of exploiting his subjects, and it's never bothered me because I've always felt a sincerity in the portrayal, that it's just, he is genuinely interested in these people, and he's not going to you know, a southern, or he's not going to Wisconsin to sit down with some idiot to make them explain to him why they're so dumb. Or, you know, he's not confronting people. He's letting them talk. In this movie, they're confronting her. They're not just letting her tell her story.
Engineering.
It's a confrontation, and that's where it feels a little.
Well, in an interesting sidebar to the Errol Morris thing, in Tabloid, there are several Q&As. I know that Tabloid hasn't been released in any proper fashion, but see it at all costs. It's an extraordinary documentary. But the subject matter of that documentary, I mean, Errol Morris is getting at one thing, and in order to get at his thesis, you know, often the subject gets thrown under the bus by herself as much as with the filmmaking, but it's there. There's a diametric, like, opposed agenda between filmmaker and subject. And there's a couple Q&As online where Joyce McKinney, the subject of the thing, basically comes up for the Q&A and says how bad Errol Morris's film of her is. And it's
I heard about that, and it's funny because I had that reaction when I saw the movie at TIFF. Like, for whatever reason, you know, I think it was because so many people were laughing in the movie, and it just felt odd to me, and it just made me stop and go, whoa, like, this poor lady is getting raked across the coals here. And it, like, I still love the movie, but that did make me feel uncomfortable, and, like, I feel like it did cross a line at some point. And then, yeah, hearing that she's now turned up at a number of Q&As and been very upset about how she's portrayed in the movie is kind of weird.
Okay, last thing for me on Catfish is a lot of friends of mine, this made it into their top 10s of the year, is a movie called New York Export Opus Jazz. And the promo image for that film is the shot from Catfish. So, you know how they're traveling around to the festival to make the other film? The other film exists, and it's apparently really, really good. I know at least one person that it was in his top 10, and I mean, there's no cross connect. Like, I mean, only people, you'd have to do there's obviously, it's a movie about dance and spontaneous of people's lives coming together in dance. I haven't seen the film, but and I'd question if anyone here has, but anyway, the only connection direct connection to Catfish is one of the promo images is that first painting from the film. So on the whole douchebaggery front, here's a way. I believe it's only actually Henry of the three guys that is involved in it, that directed it. But here's a way to look at a completely different piece of art that is made and take this sort of, a lot of it's in the moment, reacting in the moment, and realizing that you're in the moment, reacting into the moment, and you can call it douchebaggery, but you can also call it just like deer in headlights. I mean, even if it's you've planted the headlights and you're the deer, but there's this thing of when you're capturing something in real time that it's really hard to get it right because there's a bunch of different anxieties playing. And sure, you can be wrong for setting up that situation in the first place and figuring out when to call it, but
or the however year-long post-production period where you sat in the editing room with it.
Yeah, fair enough.
And was like, I'm fine with it.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's not
absolutely
just the
nothing is instant. Fair enough. But I mean, you've got what you've got, right? So then the moral question is, do we show this to other people, or do we profit off of it? Do we earn fame and fortune off of it? But here you have another, like the other two films have all these supplementary films. You can watch Tall Hot Blonde, we talked about here, but now you have a film on dance by these guys that you could look at, how they create when they're not in this sort of guerrilla documentary mode. This is what they're normally paid to do. So it's something I plan on checking out, not just because I've heard it's very good. The trailer's online. But also I do want to tie it in. I must admit, Catfish is one of those things that it's fascinating. And, you almost want the Paul Verhoeven version of Catfish that after every scene, there's like, would you like to know more? And you could click and go off, and do that, which they obviously didn't do with this DVD release, which is a shame.
Yeah.
I'd like to know if any of these other supplemental things like the 2020 deal or whatever, do they get into the possibility that Neve might not have been the only person being duped or that, I mean, she didn't create this whole world specifically for him, or maybe there was a whole, half a dozen guys across the country she was playing with at the same time.
I don't think that they had mentioned other guys, but I think they may have mentioned that she still is online and goes under different names or something. I can't really remember. I'd have to watch it again, but I don't remember there being any specific comments on other duped people.
But are Neve and Angela still friends on Facebook? That's the real question here.
That's what you got to wait till the end of the movie to find out.
And it's fascinating that's sort of how the Social Network ends. I guess it's now the official cliche ending of Facebook movies is the, friend or status ending.
Yeah. So,
I guess my main thing is I just don't know what the movie...
What the point is?
What the point is other than just...
them getting famous off it.
It's purely just a visceral, suspenseful experience, which is fine, but it doesn't really say much in my opinion. And I don't know.
It says enough to fuel a 45-minute conversation, though.
Right, but all of the conversation is like the stuff that they probably would rather people not be talking about. But even watching it again, I still, got something from it. But I also, still had some of the problems I had initially were magnified and they didn't go away. But it's more of just coming to terms with, what, I'm looking for in the film or what I look for in documentaries or whatever. It's a complicated watch, I guess.
Yeah. So, Marina, did you have any other thoughts? Because I know you kind of just, at the beginning didn't really like it, but...
I think Jay pretty much nailed it for me. I don't see the point of this. I just don't understand what the point of it was. But I had the unfortunate reaction that I just didn't care for it even as a movie. It really did nothing for me on any level.
Like, do you think it's because do you think it's because the characters, you couldn't get into the characters or the people in it?
The guys, they just and I think that maybe has something to do with it as well. I didn't like them. There was something really that put me off about them. And I think in part, I think that scene that you guys brought up earlier, that I never actually commented on, where, you know, he's asking her to talk to him in that voice. And I think that just sort of amplified everything. They just seemed really creepy and not genuine. I don't know. I never bought them. I never bought Neve and his friends or brother or whatever, whoever they were. And I felt sorry for her. Whether she's a real person or, you know, some figment of the imagination, she just seemed pathetic. And I didn't want to feel that towards anybody. The whole movie just rubbed me the wrong way. I just didn't care for anything that they were getting at, and which I never even really understood. So for me, it wasn't like a waste of my time. I'm glad I saw it, because now I sort of knew what people were talking about, but I just didn't get the hype, and I still don't. Even after listening to you guys talk about it for 45 minutes. I mean, I can sort of buy into points here and there, but I can't, in my heart, I can't bring up any emotion for it. I have no passion for this movie one way or another.
So it's an indifference and then a confusion at the hype?
That's part of it, and part of it is my own reaction to it. I really felt nothing when I walked out of that movie theater. It's very rare where I watch something and I don't have a reaction either way. I'm just sort of passive. And I was really passive when I walked out of this. I just didn't feel anything afterwards. Not even like sorry for any of the characters. I just kind of thought, well, that was kind of stupid.
I felt the same way about Michael Bay's Transformers, so I know where you're coming from.
Well, that's the thing. There's the occasional movie where that happens. It surprised me a little bit that this was
that it was this film as opposed to The Usual Suspects.
Well, exactly, because there seemed to be not only the hype about it, but there seems to be, and there still seems to be a really clear line of people that love it, people that hate it, and I'm just sort of in the middle. I just don't care. I just have no reaction to this whatsoever, other than to think that, it's an interesting concept that just, for me, didn't work. I'm still waiting for the Facebook movie.
Okay. Any other thoughts, James?
No, I guess I think I still got my copy from Blockbuster. It's mine for another 24 hours, so I think maybe I'll watch this one now with the knowledge that she's actually mentally ill and see what impressions I draw from it. I guess I went into this one without any knowledge, same way with Exit Through the Gift Shop, so perhaps I'll reassess my opinion of it. But I guess I found it interesting. I wanted to watch it, the whole thing. I found it compelling, but I guess it left me with a warm, fuzzy feeling that's starting to fade away.
Interesting.
It's interesting, just as a quick side note, that movie Billy the Kid?
Yep.
There's a documentary called Billy the Kid about a kid named Billy that falls in love with a girl and tries to court her, and he's like 13 years old or something, and he's kind of a quirky kid. And that movie was accused of a lot of staging of scenes and whatnot. And then it came out afterwards that he had Asperger's.
Yep.
And that wasn't mentioned at all in the film. So it was, the filmmaker was heavily criticized for that.
Well, I'm convinced the kid in Spellbound, the super geeky kid in Spellbound, has like full-on Asperger's, and it's never mentioned. I mean, I don't know if it's that big of a deal because you get such a small snapshot. Like, they're almost types in that film, like the way they've, here's the rich preppy kid, and here's this and there's that. But I mean, everyone laughs at that kid in the movie, but then you wonder, I mean, is he just naively, genuinely a happy sort of dorky child, or are the filmmakers intentionally or accidentally exploiting what's the difference between exploiting a character flaw versus exploiting a medical condition? And I guess that's where you get into some sticky territory.
And just a final note from me, that the scene where Angela and Neve are talking and she's drawing him, I I guess the thing that bothered me as well was just that she apologizes many times and she compliments him many times, and he just sits there and takes it all. Like, 1 second she's like, I'm so sorry what I did for you. That must have been so painful. I can see the pain in your eyes. You've got such a beautiful smile. And he's just sitting there accepting all of this. Whereas, which to me says that if accepting all of it being real, I'm pissed off that you played with me. And it's like, fair enough, but you figured it out a long time ago, and her situation is a lot worse than yours is in terms of your heart being broken on the internet when you should have been smart enough to Google and do a little bit of research and got your head out of your ass and figured out that, hey, this might not be real. So it just, you know, it's less that, well, part of it is that they actually confronted her, but they left her hanging to like just sit there and apologize, and like as though that, you know, this is the scene where you should apologize for everything you've done. Like, what if she really did have cancer? Then they showed up and she had no hair and she was like sitting in her bed with tubes and stuff. Would they be like, you know, you really hurt me. I thought we would fuck.
But the capacity with, I mean, I think all three of these movies show the capacity of people to accept lies when it's in their own interest. I mean, the head in the sand, all these guys, all these art dealers selling Elmire paintings, knowing deep down that there's just no way he's keeps pulling up. This one guy's has only painted for this 2-year window, and yet he can just keep pulling out paintings of this guy almost upon request. And yet they're turning them over for 10 times what they're buying them. So it's like, yep, just keep them coming, you know. And
willful blindness.
Neve has the same thing in the filmmakers to a degree, not Angela so much, but Neve and them, and then it's even stickier in the Banksy one about that. I think the Banksy one is the most self-aware. I think of all of them, you know, even though there's the debate about where the factual theory character and where the fictional version, you know, where they diverge, because there's enough. If you go on the internet and do enough research, there's plenty of facts that say that he's a real person. Like, you know, some investigative journalists would have debunked it right now if it was that obvious. Like, there's clearly enough there, right? But it all becomes this line of where you draw, where you do the work of like a confidence man. He gives you the confidence for you to lie to yourself. And I think all three of these movies have that line somewhere, not just for the filmmakers and the reason for being, but on the part of the viewer as well. And I think that's what inherently makes them interesting. I mean, if the Banksy film didn't have this element, would people still be talking about it? If it was just a documentary on street art told in a down and dirty found footage way, would people still be talking about it? Probably not. Catfish, same thing. Like, all of their flaws build into their mythology. It's actually a brilliant form of like perpetual, like, these films will live longer than I think a lot of fictional films because of their built-in mythologies.
Well, that's why I find it so hard to believe that they initially started filming it just to do a documentary about an online relationship. Like, what a piece of shit that would have been. I mean, they of course they would jump at the opportunity to investigate something that they think might be questionable. I mean, I'm curious as to what their goal was in terms of how they portrayed Angela in the film versus how they think people look at her at the end of the film. Like, what was their goal when they said, okay, this picture is locked? In their minds, what did they think Angela seemed like at the end of the film, and what did they think they seemed like? Did they think that they seemed like they're so shocked by the response? Did they think they seemed like the good guys, the heroes?
Well, it's what I would call the Jesus Camp syndrome in documentary filmmaking. When the two ladies made Jesus Camp, it's clearly structured like a horror movie. The musical cues, the editing, in a way, it's almost clumsily structured like a horror movie, and yet the subject's initial viewings of the film, so the story goes, is that they were, yep, that's how we're portrayed, because they're seeing it through their own filters and with their own sets of biases and blindnesses and whatever. And then they didn't hate the film until the rest of the world saw the film, and then you got, like you said, like, how do these guys see themselves versus how the sort of wave of audience members, and then of course the critical and online press reaction. And like you said, there's people that are actively, I don't think that Banksy or F is for Fake has like active enemies, whereas Catfish seems to have a fair number of people that just go out of their way to constantly harp on.
Yeah.
It's just weird that there's no moment where any of them really says, you know, I kind of feel like an ass, or I kind of feel bad. Like the one guy says, I don't want to embarrass her. And then the brother / co-director says something along the lines of, well, this is her wake up call. We can come here and wake her up to this and stop her. And it's like, that's your mission? I mean, it just seems weird to me. Like, yeah. Congratulations. You pointed it out to her, and you shook your fist or your finger in her face, and you made her talk like Megan. And
I mean, I guess you could have spun it as that they were trying to help her in some way, but it definitely didn't sound like that was their.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was the idea, but I don't know what helping her is releasing it as a major motion picture. And
oh yeah, that I think the fame element and the infamous element or whatever of when a movie becomes, I mean, Catfish is not $100 million film. I mean, in terms of a documentary of that kind, it is highly successful. Mm-hmm. In terms of a film, it's very modestly successful. I mean, it made $3 million, right? It got a lot of online press. But at the same point, even a film of modest success at what Catfish is, and certainly for first-time filmmakers, it's a huge success. That's got to have it. Like, look at what happened. Now, Blair Witch is a $100 million hoaxy-ish big online marketing campaign. I mean, that community was just flooded with people coming there. Like, I mean, it fucked up that community. The fame on that community screwed it up. And I imagine Angela is, I don't know, I don't think she's much better off. All she's done is been given the media Dr. Phil treatment, which doesn't help anyone.
Right. I mean, you can look at this, you know, this self-important sort of, we're going to step in and save Angela from herself thing that turned into this giant story, and now she's on 2020 and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's no different than Dr. Phil taking, you know, golden voice Ted Williams and forcing him into rehab and turning him into a circus, you know, freak show.
You're forgetting the one key thing is that it's great marketing for her artwork.
Well, apparently she had something to do with the design of the poster.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, but I mean, realistically,
it's a good poster.
No, it is a good poster. But realistically, is this gonna sell her art? No.
No, it will leave people just thinking, "Wow, she's pretty crazy."
Yeah,
her art is, you know, she makes
the idea that they're gonna. I see what you're saying. The idea that they get off self-congratulating that they've given a platform for her to monetize her work. That's fairly disingenuous too, I think. Yeah.
All right. So I guess is that about it? Anything else?
I think that's about it. I mean, I would say people who like Catfish should see Tall Hot Blonde just to see that approach to a similar story. Yeah. And Catfish is definitely a better film, but I think if Tall Hot Blonde was they had the access that the filmmakers in Catfish had, not that, you know, the people in the story were filming it themselves and, you know, pushing this along to get to the point where it gets to. I think that would end up, the film would end up in a court trial or something. Which says something about the Catfish. Like, if anything bad happened in Catfish, they would possibly be on trial for it. So it's the idea of the filmmaker being a little too involved in the story, I think. But with Tall Hot Blonde, it's similar, just not as captivating and engaging. But the actual story itself is probably a little more interesting.
Yeah.
And Matt wanted me to point out that he just sent me an email saying that 2010, and that's part of the reason why we did this show, is that 2010 was certainly the year of the of a lot of them. So like what films we didn't mention, but I guess would make for supplementary viewing on top of all the other supplementary viewing that you could go into with these films would be Winnebago Man, which really walks the line of staged versus not staged and how a film was crafted and how the documentary evolved. And I'm Still Here, which we did bring up at one point. There's just been a lot of films about perception and I mean, even the fiction films like Inception and Shutter Island and all the other ones. But there were a lot of strange documentaries this year. And while the Academy did recognize the Banksy one in the award nomination, the other ones were, they didn't, that was the only one they really went out on a limb for.
Yeah, there was something else. One of the other ones I was a little surprised at too.
Gasland, because it's
right.
I mean, again, good message, bad filmmaking, like all around bad filmmaking.
I didn't think it was bad filmmaking.
I think that movie's pretty grotty.
I actually
look great, but
liked what he did with what he had, but I agree that it's nominated because of the message.
Yeah.
Okay, so next episode of the Movie Club podcast, I believe we're going to do a bit of a fantasy thing here. We're going to do Zardoz, starring Sean Connery, and Flash Gordon, the 80s movie. 70s? 80s.
70s.
So that should be pretty fun, pretty different from this one, I think. And of course, if you have other suggestions or ideas for future episodes, you can always email us or leave a comment on the site. And we do want you to go over to movieclubpodcast.com and leave your own comments about the movies that we've just talked about, because there's still a lot of discussion to be had, I'm sure, and everyone has their own take on these movies. So feel free to let us know what you thought. And I think that's about it. Stay tuned to all of our respective websites for more great movie discussion. And I don't know, maybe Matt and Andrew will be back for the next episode if we can twist their arm a little bit.
What happened to Matt tonight?
Working.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he says, but he's actually
Fucker.
he's actually doing his. Did you guys know he's been doing stand-up lately?
Okay,
He's moonlighting as a I wouldn't pay, but I would attend to see stand up.
Yeah, he's over at the airport Holiday Inn in Bloomington.
I guess it beats the
Like
Hojo.
an open mic night or something?
No, it's a paying gig. He's developed kind of a fan base. It's like mostly observational stuff, but he's got some kinks to work out of his routine. He's kind of, it's sort of a Seinfeld type thing. It's like, one of his deals is he says, why is it called taking a shit? If anything, it should be called leaving a shit. You're not taking it anywhere. And then he does like 45 minutes of like material on basically like sea life, like squids and whatnot. And
Are you joking? You're joking.
He's working.
So that's like F for fake moment.
sure.
Well, that's brilliant for taking it at least 4 solid minutes, though, James.
That was pretty amazing. I don't know. The sea life, I think, was the giveaway at that point.
I think it was he does 45 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, you could have had me for another 5 minutes easy.
Oh, I could have gone into that, yeah.
All right. Well, that's definitely a fitting story. So yeah, I guess that's about it. And we'll see you probably 2 months from now, month and a half.
Sure, it could be a day if you just downloaded this episode 2 months after it was published.
So yeah, we'll see you next time right here on the Movie Club podcast.
Goodbye.
Stop.